Hi. I just do the lost everything. I gotta join the. Yes, I gotta rejoin.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
That means things don't get it. No.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the introduction work group dated June 6th, 2022. Tonight, we do have a somewhat packed agenda. We will be conducting the academic year in review to discuss the progress we've made this year. We'll go into a wellness check with an update on some COVID metrics in our community. We'll then talk about two high intensity partnerships with our district and district partners. And then we'll conclude by discussing two policy changes to our behavioral and instructional strategy. So let's get started with the wellness check. Dr. Esser and Nurse Carey, are you with us?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Take us away.
Hi, welcome everyone. So just giving a quick update in regards to our community metrics. We have definitely reached our peak in Dane County when we look at our number of COVID cases, although our numbers are still quite elevated, but they are coming down. We are experiencing the same thing in MMSD. I actually think our numbers look really good this week so far compared to last week. We had quite a high number of cases the Tuesday after Memorial Day, but they have come down quite nicely. So we're continuing to watch that closely. When we look at our testing, we are doing just under 2,000 rapid antigen tests per week and 2,000 PCR tests per week. So we are continuing to have a very strong testing program here at MMSD. Just a reminder to everyone that all of our sites will remain open through June 10th. And then starting next week on Monday, June 13th, only our summer school sites will be open, but they will be open to our entire MMSD community. So even if you're not attending summer school, if you're an MMSD staff, student, or family member, you can get testing for free at any of our sites. That will continue through the entire summer school. So we have testing on site through the end of June. And then we are still in the planning process for next year of what the testing will look like. We do know that we'll have some sort of COVID testing. We're just not sure to what degree and capacity, what that will look like. So we're continuing to partner with ACL for all of our COVID testing in our schools. When we look at vaccines, you've probably all heard the 5 to 11-year-olds are now eligible for their booster shot as long as it's been 5 months since they've received their second dose of their 2-dose vaccine series. We are continuing to partner with Public Health Madison-Dane County. They are offering pop-up vaccine clinics at 3 of our elementary schools during their food pantry drop-offs. These sites are open to the entire community. You don't even need to be an MMSD staff, student, or community member. It's open to everyone in Dane County could go there and receive a vaccine if they wanted to. And then most exciting, we are planning a district-wide vaccine event at Lincoln Elementary School on June 23rd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And this is open to all MMSD students, staff, and family members. But we're particularly targeting our 5 to 11-year-old students that are eligible for their booster. So we'll be holding that clinic all day on Thursday, June 23rd at Lincoln Elementary School in partnership with SSM Dean St. Mary's. So we're excited about that. And that is all for my update. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any board member questions? Board member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Carrie and Leah, for this update. One thing that I did notice in the memo that you gave us was the climate survey of students, and it references that this will be shared with schools. Is this also going to be shared with the board? And can you tell us, like, timing wise, when we might expect to see that? And also the family and the staff climate surveys that went out as well.
Let's see if Cindy or Beth are here. Cindy, you want to take that one? You want to start it at least?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the question, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. Our staff and our family climate survey are still underway, and they do not close until this Sunday, the 12th. We also just closed recently the student climate survey and are planning on providing an update to the board in the next few weeks so that you can have a comprehensive look at that. Tonight, you'll see a couple highlights of just initial analysis around our student survey, but we wanted to provide a more comprehensive report to the board after we have a chance to look at it ourselves. And then similarly, you will receive an update from us in terms of the findings of our staff and our family survey, which are still open and still active if people are listening and want to give us feedback. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much. And then I just have one more quick comment and question. Carrie, I'm happy to hear that, the cases are mirroring what we see in the community as far as we're seeing a decrease both in the community and in MMSD. And one of the things we talked about in the metrics meeting last week was moving away from a zero risk strategy. So really looking at how we can lean forward on some of the things that we're doing and move on some of these things. Is there anything you can sort of update the community on that and what we can expect looking forward?
So I think, we, as usual, we continue to really look at everything, and we know that COVID is going to be here, and it's going to be here for a long time. And so it's trying to really find that right balance of where we are still being safe, but we're also allowing kids to be kids and be able to experience school in the way that we all know it. And so we know that we're never going to be able to get to a zero risk. Just going out into the community, there's risk everywhere that you go to be able to contract COVID-19. But I think it's being able to look at that risk and really making sure that we are doing everything that we can, but knowing that we're not going to have a zero risk in our school environment. And so one of the things that we'll be talking about at metrics, hopefully tomorrow, will be an update around masking and looking at summer school and making decisions around that. So expecting more to come after metrics tomorrow.
All right, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. So the queue is Board Member Simpkin, followed by Board Member Vandermillen, followed by Board Member Nichols.
My question was specifically around masking in summer school. So it sounds like after tomorrow, we should have more information on that. And what is the, what's the data point you're looking for in order to make masks no longer mandatory, but move them to recommended?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get asked that a lot, and there's not really one data point that we use. We look at a lot of different things of what are happening in our community, and kind of where our numbers are, but also where are we seeing spread, and kind of what's happening in our school district. That also includes staffing. We look at our staffing ratios and our ability to be able to keep our schools staffed and open. That's our ultimate goal, is to make sure that we have kids in schools learning. And so we take kind of all those things, but there's not one particular data point that we use for an ultimate decision maker. It's really looking at things holistically and really trying to make the best decisions moving forward.
Thank you.
Board Member Vandermolen.
Yes, I know you guys do an awful lot of work, Nurse Carrie, and you all do a very good job. Is it possible, just to save you guys some time, if you just give us the results of the survey, so that way you don't have to write another proposal? I mean, that way we can still see the data and without overburdening the team, so they can work on important things such as budget and that.
Yeah, Nikki, I appreciate that. I believe that our research and evaluation team has a pretty comprehensive plan and has carved out the time in order to get the board a summary of that information. But I appreciate that consideration as we think forward.
And what, may I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
If that's a summary, if we needed to, could we see the full data?
I will defer to Cindy perhaps on this one.
I apologize. Could you repeat your question, please?
Oh, absolutely. I was wondering if we could see the full, besides the summary of the data, which, as I said, takes a lot of work, could I also see the full data if need be?
Yeah, I will get back to you to answer that question specifically. If I recall, there is access in some of our Tableau or dashboards for that, but let me follow up with our research and innovation team, Board Member Vandermeulen, to confirm that, and we will make sure to get back to you.
Thank you.
All right, Board Member Nichols.
Great. Oh, I don't have to. Okay. Two questions. One, also about the climate survey. I know in the past, pre-COVID, there had been quite a bit an effort to have continuity in the questions or statements that were being asked year to year so that you could kind of see a trend over time. I'm wondering, with the newer version of the climate survey, would you all be able to provide the questions that were asked for students, staff, and families? Or will that be part of the report that research and evaluation provides?
We can definitely do that. And to your first point, we kept some of the questions consistent to be able to see those historic trends.
Great. And then the second question is going back to the health services update. I was happy to see that Student Services is going to offer a summer conference in August. I'm looking at the team of folks that will be included in that. And I'm wondering, will there be any work like this offered to principals? Because it seems like there's a big focus on the foundational practices. And I'm just wondering if where principals will be regarding that same opportunity for reflective planning and knowledge and training.
I'll kick this off just from a student services perspective, and then we'll lean to my colleagues regarding our administrator institutes. Nichelle, you bring up a really good point. It's so critical that when we are training our staff on certain practices, setting expectations around that, building schedules, resources, et cetera, that we keep our leaders looped in and part of that process. So I think it's both an information sharing opportunity to really get them the information at their level that they need around what was taught at that institute, but also ensuring that we have the time and space for administrators to be working with their culture and climate teams and really talking about their plan and their work and their vision moving forward. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to the larger institute and what that will be, but Nichelle, that's good feedback, and we'll take that back to our team for consideration.
All right, thank you, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. I'll add myself to the queue.
Thank you. I just had one more question for clarification. I've been getting a lot of questions about masks at graduation ceremonies that are going to be held at venues outside of our MMSD schools. Can we just get some clarification on that as those are coming up this week?
Sure. So masks are required. It's an MMSD sponsored event. So all of our MMSD sponsored events, masks are required, even if it's located at an off-site location. So masks will be required at graduation, and we will be offering them out to people if they don't have them at the event.
Okay. I'll just say for the record, I'm not sure about that decision, given it's at venues outside of ours and the size of the venues, and it's not required in Dane County, but thank you for clarifying the decision.
All right, thank you. Okay, my question was, I really was interested in reading about the school-based health centers that we are going to open up next year. And when we think about our strategy of focusing on the whole child, I think this is a promising aspect. Could you share a little bit more about the job descriptions that were posted?
I can start, and then Carrie, please feel free to jump in. So thank you to the Board of Education for approving 2 positions on ESSER for our high school school-based health centers. This effort has been a long time coming. Somebody on the team was joking that they were so glad somebody else was not in a wheelchair yet when we're implementing this, because we've been waiting for so long. So we're beyond excited that today is the day, or now is the time. So there are 2 positions for next year. One is a school-based health center planner with a mental health focus, and one is a school-based health center coordinator, project manager with a nurse practitioner background. So next year's efforts are really going to be focused on building the program and building the financial plan to make this a stable option that we can continue to have year after year in all of our schools. Next school year, tangibly, what you'll see in our schools is the addition of a therapist who will be the start of the school-based health center. So we have, again, thank you to you all. We have funding for that and are able to start that work. And then we will be working this year to secure funds, grants, a funding stream, whatever that might be, working with the insurers, et cetera, to really build up the whole clinic with the physical health aspect as well. So it's a slow and steady process, but we are so grateful to this board for giving us the opportunity to get going. We really, really are excited about this.
Thank you. One immediate question I have is, do you know how adding these additional therapists will impact our ratios of, by high school, our ratios of therapists to student ratios in our high schools?
So we don't necessarily have a therapist to student ratio when we think about ratios, we're thinking about our psychologists, social workers, counselors, and nurses, and not necessarily outside therapists. But what I can say is we're going from 0 therapists, technical therapists in our high schools to 1. So we're increasing that in four places across the district. So this will be an external partner an external agency we partner with, and they hire the therapists and provide those. So they're not necessarily like available for anyone. There would be a process, a referral system, et cetera.
And a last question then, Board Member Nichols. What kinds of services will students be able to access?
Gary, do you want to take that one, the type of services they can access in our health centers?
Sure. So in regards to physical health, so that really hasn't fully been defined yet. It really depends on the model, who our partner is, but we are looking for full access to all services, which would include laboratory if needed, pharmacy services. So if anybody needs a medication for that. So it'd be basically like a full primary care clinic, and it's really meant to be abridged so that we can get people access into a medical home. But until that time, that school-based clinic would be able to do that. So we have not gotten into the great detail of what all services are going to be provided at that site. Again, a lot of it depends on the partnerships that we develop and who specifically we partner with in regards to the medical services.
Thank you. And so do we know if students will need insurance?
Our goal is that all students will have access to these services, whether they have insurance, whether they have MA, whether they have no insurance. It won't be dependent on that.
I think it's not even just a goal, it's really our expectation. We certainly want to support families to get insurance for a variety of reasons. So we do use internal resources to support that coordination. But ultimately, the reason for bringing this to our schools is to remove those barriers to access, insurance being one of them. So similar to our BHS program, that is not a condition. In fact, in some respects, we want to serve uninsured kids more because they're the students who are not getting access to what they need in the community.
Thank you. Board Member Nichols.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I also am super excited to see this happen. One of the things, and this is more of a logistical question, and if you don't know the answer yet, that's fine. What I recall, one of the things we learned through behavioral health in schools was that in order to have a therapist working in the school, they needed an office that they could lock, a secure filing cabinet in order to protect records of our students, and also to hold confidential meetings and sessions with students. I know that the high schools are going to be under construction. Do you foresee that there might be any issues securing kind of the basic room or office structure in order to have a therapist meeting, a therapist on site?
A great question. I think I would be foolish to say space is not a limitation in our district. However, I will tell you that our high school student services staff are so excited about this. They are guarding the spaces that they have identified very, very fiercely. In addition, we are meeting with principals, I can't remember when, sorry, to really go through this process and this what they can expect moving forward and the resources that will go along with it and the resources that they will have to provide. So space being one of those. I had one psych tell me she was like guarding it with her life. Anytime anybody asks, that she's like, nope, this is ours. So we want to make sure that's the case in all of our schools.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Esser and Nurse Carey. We really appreciate this update and that work. And so now moving on to our academic year in review, we have Cindy with some of our associate superintendents.
Thank you, Chair Castro, and good evening again, board members. Jesse, could you do me a favor and share the screen? Wonderful. I am going to go over a few slides and then I'm going to pause for a minute to see if Dr. Jenkins would like to chime in before we get into the heart of this evening. Could you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? Just a reminder of our vision as a school district and making sure we focus on every school, every student thriving in our district and graduating college career community ready. Ensuring that through everything we do, we are centering and uplifting our 3 goals. I apologize, I have a tickle in my throat, so I'm going to try and get through this. Can you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? And our core values. And I think tonight when you see some of the content we have to share with you in our year in review, I hopefully will have you see how we really are trying to live these core values and not just have them live on paper, but live them in the work that we are doing every day. So I am looking forward to sharing that with you in a minute. And so our outcomes for tonight, as Chair Castro shared with you already, we have 3 kind of large outcomes for the evening. One, we are going to look at our year in review. We have 2 policies that will be coming forth at the end of the month for your approval, and 2 requests for an extension of 2 of our high intensity partnerships. So those are our outcomes for the evening. And before we kick off our year in review, there's a few things that I just wanted to mention. We are going to be sharing some emerging data with you this evening. I think it's important to note that much of our traditional academic data will not be available until the end of June, sometimes early July. So we're excited to be able to bring back to you through an instruction work group and through weekly reports the kind of comprehensive overview that outlines all of our strategic framework metrics. But what we are going to share with you tonight, some of the accomplishments that have happened throughout this year that has been a year like no others, where we have been able to continue to center on the whole child, continue to make some very important system decisions together, and we also have a lot that our staff as well as our students have accomplished this year. So I'm looking forward to that. You'll also notice that tonight does uplift many of our young people. We know that the rest of this week after tonight is definitely about focusing and celebrating our seniors, so I wouldn't want to leave that out, but tonight you will see more about all of our young people 4K to 12. And before I just turn it over to the start of the presentation, let me see, Dr. Jenkins, if there's anything else you would like to mention before we really get started.
I'll just say to the board and to our community, we're really excited to present this particular data, and also thank you at the beginning of the meeting for those particular questions so that we all can get clarity in terms of how we're moving. This data tonight is just emerging data. It's not all the data. As Mrs. Green had said, we're going to come back in August once we have all of our data in. And just to everyone knowing that we are not necessarily out of the pandemic, we're emerging out of the pandemic. And so things are data that we have now, we're still waiting to even begin to move into next year as we're leaning forward, but now building momentum about things that we have learned during this past academic year. So I know Mrs. Green and the team, you all are ready to present tonight, so let me step out of the way. Thank you.
We are ready. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Next slide, please. And so here we start with some of the significant accomplishments that have been made this year. Some of you were able to join us for a historic movement that has really happened in MMSD where we did a land acknowledgement. I'd like to start by showing a video from that day to really get us going. Thanks, Jesse.
America was built on indigenous land.
I would like for all of us to begin to look within ourselves. We don't get it right with human decency until we correct it for an individual. We had our indigenous people here on this land living peacefully before it began to be colonized. It's really acknowledging the history of how we came to be here in America. Hello, I'm Carlton D. Jenkins, a proud superintendent of Madison Metropolitan School District.
My name is Marina Fox Baker. I'm a junior at Madison East High School.
My name is Tara Tyndall. I am the Native American teacher leader for Madison Metropolitan School District.
My name is Issa Saiz. I am a part of the Ponca Tribe of Nebraska.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Stanford Taylor. I am Deputy Superintendent of the Division of Engagement, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Madison Metropolitan School District.
My name is Marlon White Eagle, President of the Ho-Chunk Nation. The Ho-Chunk Nation is a sovereign tribe here in Wisconsin, and I'm the leader of the executive branch of the government. Today, the Madison School District took some time to recognize, acknowledge, and think about the history of the Ho-Chunk people and the land base that they occupied, that it is our ancestral land of the Ho-Chunk people.
This was something that was long overdue, the acknowledgement of our indigenous people. And today we brought together many people, very diverse group, elders. We had community leaders, city leaders, we had various school board members, our board chair was here to speak.
The special thing about this event is that it was student-led. This idea bubbled up from our kids, and we always encourage them to lend their voice because this is their school district. We want them to feel like they're included in everything that happens here. They have a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership.
Native American Student Association main goal is to raise awareness about Indigenous invisibility in schools especially.
It's important to have these kind of events to, I guess, like abolish Indigenous invisibility.
This was amazing. I'm super glad that Ho-Chunk Nation members could make it out and make sure that we keep our promises for them. So I'm really glad that I was able to speak.
It's the first time that our community has gotten together in person in 2 years.
It was also the revealing of our plaque. All of our schools now are going to have this amazing plaque.
Now there's a permanent marker, here in the city of Madison within the school district where it's going to shine a light on Ho-Chunk history as long as these markers stay in place.
Together, as we saw here with this event, then we are a part. It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
And it's time.
Thank you, Jesse. I just want to say two things before we go on to the next slide. It is intentional that we use the word movement and not a historic moment because we are starting and we must continue with the work that we started over at Holtzman that day with the land acknowledgement. And the second thing that I think is really important that was mentioned is this came from our students and was led by our students. And when I think about some of the accomplishments we've made this year, many are because of the voices of our young people. So really proud of the direction we are going and the movement that has begun. Thanks, Jesse. Can you go to the next slide? And so with that, because of all of you and the decisions that you have made, we have had some significant system accomplishments this year. And while they may have been short-term investments, we believe they are going to have lasting and long-term impact for our students. The first started with that literacy material adoption that really came out of the literacy task force that was developed and wrote the report for the community back in the fall. We believe that is not only going to be impactful for our students that will be in grades K to 5 next year, that will have long-lasting impact for all of our students and improvement in literacy and reading outcomes. We also had facility improvements. We have shared with you a few times, but 40 plus new playgrounds across the board that are going to continue to have our students thrive in our outdoor spaces and during physical activity times. The 4K expansion, again, another long-term impact of expanding 16 sections for next year. So we're really looking forward to the continuation of that and providing the board updates. Another huge accomplishment this year is not only some of the investments we made for this current school year in relation to our student services staff like counselors, but the intentionality we have for the expansion next year for more social workers, for more social emotional learning supports, mental health, millions of dollars that we have committed to, and because of all of you on the board are able to provide more supports for our young people, and also thinking about adult social, emotional, and mental health needs as well. And then last, thinking about engagement. And I think that video showed a really good example of ways to think about engagement and ways to lift our young people's voices, to bring them to the table to help us make decisions that we know are going to be really important for their future and for our future. So just a few of the system level accomplishments that have happened today. Could you go to the next slide, please? One additional accomplishment was our first ever, that early staff signing day that I know many of you were able to be a part of as well. And from that, able to have some of our student teachers and others get contracts early on and secure their spot to work in MMSD next year. So a real huge accomplishment for us. Next slide, please, Jesse. Thank you. And then here is just a few of the accomplishments that have happened where we are continuing to uplift our commitment to Black excellence and show the brilliance of our young people. I won't name everything on this slide, but one critically important thing to remember is that we had two of our seniors that earned a Fulbright scholarship, which is a full 4-year scholarship to prestigious universities. One of those is one of our very own student reps, Gordon Allen. We also had many of our schools think differently about how to uplift and showcase Black History Month. We had others with our seniors in terms of some of the brilliance that they have done. But just a small example here of some of the commitment we have to Black excellence and uplifting all of the brilliance of our young people. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our Associate Superintendents of Elementary School, Carletra Stanford, Ennis Harvey, and Chelsea Tubbs, and they're going to walk through some more of the accomplishments at the elementary level.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize. I'm having some internet issues. So as I am talking, if I break up, feel free to please let me know that so that I can repeat, if necessary, any information. So good evening, and it is a pleasure to join you here today to share just a fraction of the remarkable work and accomplishments that have occurred this year in elementary schools. Our leaders and staff have led with excellence, equity, humanity, and intentionality throughout the entire 21-22 school year. And so we want to start again by putting the voice of our scholars into this space by highlighting one of our Marquette scholars, Messiah Rose. And so we were on a visit to Marquette, and Messiah was at her locker writing something on her whiteboard. And we stopped to have a conversation with her and asked her what she was writing. And she said that every morning she writes herself a motivational message. And on this particular day, her motivational message was, "You can do this." And so when we asked her about that, she said that she just makes up motivational quotes, or she uses some that she has seen other places. And she also asked her mother for those quotes because that is the way that she likes to start her day. And when we asked if we could share her picture and this information with you all for the board meeting, her response was, yes, I would love to inspire. So tonight we're introducing you all to Miss Messiah Rose Abernathy, an MMSD scholar who was and does inspire. And we know that we'll be hearing from her in the future. Next slide. I don't know if it went because I can't see it, y'all. So, okay. We also wanted to lift into the space Black excellence. And just by talking about two of the accomplishments from Leopold Elementary School and also Lakeview, excuse me. Leopold Elementary modeled Because of Them We Can by capturing students as African-American pioneers, activists, and change makers from the Madison community. And students not only had a photo shoot as that person, but they also learned about their contributions to the Madison community and beyond. And Lakeview Elementary welcomed local artist and activist Lydia G to their school to learn about her art and inspiration for what she does. Next slide. And speaking of the arts, schools held concerts on the, that's the PEG group. We're going to go to the PEG group. As we navigated through the many twists and turns of COVID, parent engagement and connectedness was and continues to be a top priority. And two parent engagement and empowerment groups are Van Heist, that you'll see here on the left-hand side, and also Chavez. These two parent engagement groups are great examples of the work that we are doing with our parents, again, as we navigated our way through COVID and back to in-person instruction. And for the past 3 years, the Van Heist PEG group has been led by an SEA that is a 24-year veteran in MMSD. And in 2020, Miss Chanel, who the students call her, along with Van Heist principal Mary Seidel, launched a PEG group for families of African-American scholars. And Miss Chanel and the Van Heist team have done a wonderful job in connecting families and deepening relationships. The Chavez PEG group was recently recognized by a local TV station for their work with the celebration of Children's Day and children in Latin American countries. And students and families enjoyed entertainment, food, fun, and plenty of laughter. Next slide. So Cindy, if you can help me out because my slides aren't, there we go. They're not changing with the time. So again, with the arts, our school celebrated concerts on the blacktop to celebrate and demonstrate fine arts in our schools. Miss Felton, who was a phenomenal strings teacher at Mendota Elementary School, that not only teaches students the basics of strings, but also instills in them an appreciation of the arts by working with them to compose and rearrange their own music. Shorewood music teacher held choir concerts on the blacktop with all K-5 students, with having them or giving them the opportunity to sing accompanied by local musicians. Next slide. Which one is that one, Cindy? Is that the renaming?
That is the renaming.
That changed, okay. Thank you all for your patience. So the renaming ceremonies, what a phenomenal way to celebrate and honor our school name changes. Both Miss Malele Chikasa Anana and Dr. Virginia Henderson were African-American women who dedicated their lives to the schools, district, Madison community, and beyond. From the singing of songs, dancing, and student speeches about the importance of their name change for their schools, the events brought the community and school together. It was a true testament to the pride that scholars and staff have for their school. Those are live links so that you can read about and also see some of the fabulous singing and performances that occurred by scholars during those ceremonies. Next slide. And this slide should be MVE. And before starting off and just giving general information, I would like to acknowledge and thank the teaching staff of Madison Virtual Elementary. They were a true example of resilience, flexibility, creativity, dependability, and passion for educating our scholars. They stepped into a challenging situation that had several bumps as we learned together to support our youngest scholars. So we are forever grateful for the work that was done this year. And kudos as well, because she would never take credit, to Deputy Associate Superintendent Chelsea Tubbs and Mary Kay for their day-to-day work with the MVE program. Next slide. We also just wanted to lift MVE enrollment as it fluctuated throughout this entire school year. So at the very beginning of MVE's inception, there were 517 students that were enrolled. You can see from this, well, it's kind of hard to see, but from this slide, that there was an increase in enrollment for second semester with MVE growing to 623 students. As of mid-May, enrollment dropped to 374 students, and our ability to transition students from virtual to in-person instruction was a true testament to our parents' belief and support of the mitigation strategies that were put in place by MMSD, as well as availability of vaccines. So again, this is only a glimpse of the work that occurred in elementary school. And we know that this is always an intense and busy time of the year. And as we look to learn from the past, work that we've done, continue to stay grounded in the present and plan for the future, we just wanted to let you know again of the work that was done by our scholars, our staff, and the coming together of our community and our families. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Hicks, who will bring you the accomplishments for middle school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford, for that great presentation. I'd like to begin by just speaking about how wonderful it has been to be in this role as Associate Superintendent of Secondary and Middle Schools and be able to see the greatness that is happening across our district. Some of the things that have occurred this year our advanced learning student, an 8th grader, Angelina Chang from Hamilton. She won first place, and Emma Kadarsa from Spring Harbor won second place in the math festival this May against students from Sun Prairie and Middleton. We were excited to have 48 of our 5th through 8th graders compete against students from Sun Prairie and Middleton school districts back in April. And MMSD hosted, hosted a total of 144 students at the Goodman Community Center here in Madison on those 2 days. The math competition consisted of individual and team competitions. Middle school did a fabulous job, also improving on-time IEPs throughout this school years for our scholars with disabilities. Actually, this is the second time. Last year, our district had a national AVID speaker virtually, Johanna Gonzalez, 8th grader, who is now a 9th grader from Wright Middle School. And then this year, again, on June 28th in San Diego, California, Maria Sabota, a 7th grade student at Wright Middle School, will be the first MMS student ever to address in person AVID Summer Institute. And then also the AVID coordinator and elective teacher, Linda Bernhardt, was also chosen to address the National AVID Virtual Professional Learning Conference this summer. This year, there were over 1,500 students in the AVID elective class from grades 7 through 12. And then the AVID TOPS partnerships additionally supported almost 700 AVID TOPS alumni who are currently in college. This was the first year AVID school-wide implementation was at Badger Rock Middle School. I'd also like to highlight restorative justice leaders at in our district at Wright Middle School who increased student leadership and centered student voice through a more comprehensive use of restorative practices, which includes daily circles in all classrooms, with students as circle keepers and leaders, as well as included scholars as circle keepers when conflict occurred, especially peer-to-peer, or to help process and take action for an issue which arises in their school community or at large. They trained 28 scholars for that program. They ascertained members from a variety of groups in the school, BSU, GSA, Juventud, Eye to Eye, Latinx Club, as well as to ensure that they were able to support and facilitate and make sure that all voices were represented within the school community. Also, this group of scholars did some training and teaching with staff in order to help them to understand better what restorative practices and restorative justice is, to help them to begin to shift their mindset. And then, as was spoken about earlier around our playgrounds, just the joy that these new programs have brought our middle school scholars and provided an extension to their classroom learning environment, which allowed them to continue to be young people enjoying the fruits of life and being able to express themselves in ways that are not so conducive to being challenged or locked up, and being able to be free and open and express themselves openly. I'm now going to turn this over to Nelson Render.
All right, good evening, MMSD family. I'm excited to bring you just a few of the accomplishments that our high school scholars have achieved. I could not be more proud of our high school leaders, the Dream Team, for their commitment to making high school scholars' dreams come true through graduation. As denoted in the pictures that you see, we have some of our scholars here featured. We have China Ezel, an LHS scholar whose acceptance is her first time acceptance in the college, and she's the first member of her family who plans to go to college. And she plans to study early childhood education. We have East, with a culinary class, got a surprise virtual visit from the owner of Dookie Chase Restaurant while making the founder's famous gumbo. And I know some of us on the screen remember that gumbo, and it was delicious. At Bell Phillips Memorial, we have 3 of our seniors who received full scholarships to the same university, an HBCU, Tennessee State University. And also, Memorial were the winners of the 2022 100 Black Men African American Academic Challenge. At West, we had the return of our homecoming festivities. Students and staff had a great big celebration. I was there, and it was just so awesome seeing the drum line out there, seeing the students' smiles on their faces through their masks. It was just so awesome. And Shabazz, we have some of our students enjoying lunch. This was the first day of school in their comfortable space. And then we have some of our PGT students paddling on Starkwater Creek. Next slide, please. Providing the opportunity for scholars to participate in co-curriculars was just another way of bringing our scholars back to in-person learning. We celebrated, highlighted, and uplifted our scholars achieving excellence in co-curriculars with the Breakfast with Champions. We know the powerful and positive impact co-curriculars had on our scholars' well-being and their belonging to school. And so we were so proud to have this celebration. Next slide, please. Again, here's just a few more tidbits as far as major accomplishments for this year. We had over 200 AVID top scholars who announced their plans to attend colleges and universities all across the United States and abroad. And we have 26 semifinalists for the National Merit Scholarship. At Memorial, over 70 scholars received the I Am Black Excellence Award. This is the second annual award ceremony. And we have 7 students who applied to receive Rotary scholarships, all received the scholarship, and that's the first time in school history. And Antonio Thompson, he received the HBCU scholarship at the Milwaukee's Bucks game. At East, we had 2 student-led groups, GSA and the Sexual Violence Prevention Group. They spearheaded and made sure they created presentations and posters around sexual violence and sexual assault. And they even conducted professional development for the staff and the students. And I have to say, I was over there this morning, and the posters that they hung up were just so professionally done. So again, excellent job to those scholars. At Shabazz, it's the first time we have reading scores by using the Achieve 3000 level set diagnostic. We saw an average increase of 47% in Lexile scores during the year amongst all grade levels. And over 100 of those scholars were participating in the field-based learning opportunities and partnered with community members. Also at West, and again, this is a preliminary data point, but the 9th grade on track to graduate data, the students' data rose from 65% to over almost 86% at the start of the semester. As you see, this is a great increase, and we want to make sure that we understand that as we plan these type of events, and we plan to make sure our scholars are on track, we have to start at the 9th grade. And so again, an excellent data point from West. From La Follette, 15 BSU students secured almost $900,000 in scholarships, with one of our scholars who received the Gates Millennial Scholar. And this is with over 80 applications and 30 acceptances. And then finally at Capital, the on track to graduation data that's provided to us from February up to June, it has improved from 47% to 57%, which means more of our scholars are definitely on track to graduate. So thanks to the team over at Capital. Finally, as we continue to lean forward together, and we're headed towards our breakthrough with excellence, equity, intentionality, and humanity to provide more scholars access to post-secondary opportunities, I want to say that we are specifically excited for our school communities, our principals, and our staff as they have completed preparations for our commencement ceremonies that will happen this week. Again, we're very proud of our scholars and our school communities. Now, I will turn it over to Langston.
Greetings, board members. And I want to take what Nelson was saying about our high schools, what they're doing, and give you an update on really how we are changing our measure of success as educators, as to not just give students meaningful and powerful experiences in high school, but to have them prepared to be successful and know where they want to go and have the skills and the confidence to succeed in their post-high school paths. And so we want to celebrate that at this moment. We know when the class of 2022, many of them stepped onto their high school campus in 2018 in a world that does not look like the world we have now. And so this year we came in and we intentionally doubled down on supporting our seniors. We created more structured resources and guidance to support our students across 6 paths of where they might want to go after high school. And we were very intentional about creating resources to support them wherever they want to go, whether that be employment, 2 or 4 year college, a gap year, apprenticeship, military, or job training programs. We empowered our staff to have our seniors complete a post-high school plan that not only included the path that they chose to take, but the essential steps they need to take while in high school to be successful in their particularly chosen paths. Our very preliminary data showed that over 85% of our students at this point not only chose a path and communicated that to a caring adult in their school, but have completed critical steps to be successful on their chosen path after graduation. And so I want to share our gratitude to our high school staff, because we know it takes a village of our high school staff working with families, working with our community, bringing in resources like FAFSA fairs and post-high school weeks, and apprenticeship and skilled trades into our schools, taking our students on field trips to make sure that they understand what the multitude of opportunities they have before them after high school. And so we know we needed to lead with relationships, but end with success. And that is what we have doubled down on this year, making sure our students have a plan and the steps to be successful in that plan after high school. And I will turn this over to Dr. Nancy Mofender.
Thank you very much. I have just a few highlights for our scholars with an IEP as we wrap up this 2021-22 school year. One small caveat that a couple of these numbers I'll point out may have changed just slightly in the last couple of weeks, but only in the right direction. So this first bullet point, you'll probably remember that back at the beginning of the school year, I spoke about the implementation of our anti-racist IEP criteria. And I wanted to highlight that with some connections that our staff, Nakaya Wiley and others have made. The Department of Public Instruction and other school districts have asked for that information and are now planning to implement an anti-racist IEP criteria as well. So much gratitude to those scholars in student services and their families who have been part of this process. But more than 350 of them have had that, and I'm sure that that number has gone up a bit. The next one, we do in the district, just in case anyone isn't aware, after an IEP meeting is completed and the IEP is archived in our system, families get a link to a post-IEP survey. And we've had about 425 of those completed this year, which is a little bit more than 10%. And 95% of those, more than 400, were fully positive. So while it's been a challenging year, that says to me that our staff have made amazing connections with families and scholars, many have gotten the support that they needed and families recognize that. I will say that one of our goals next year in student services is going to be to increase the % of family members who complete that survey, and particularly making sure that the demographics of who completes our survey match our students and families in the district. The next one, again, may change just slightly before the end of this week, but it would only be going in the right direction. So this 35 out of 40, this is 40 of our scholars who remain in transition services beyond their 12th grade year. They primarily are comprised of scholars who have what we would consider to be higher support needs. They stay on for these transition services, and out of 40 who are going to be graduating from their homeschool transition program, Campus Connect, which is a program that we support at Madison College, or Project Search, which is job training at our hospitals, 35 out of 40 of those graduating have either secured paid employment or have additional college planned, or both in some cases. And then lastly, I know that I was joined by a couple of you last Friday night for the Foundation's Central Graduation, which is scholars with an IEP who are not necessarily in these traditional transition programs, but did not graduate after their 12th grade year, and then came back into the fold in our school district and graduated. That was what a wonderful occasion to be part of last Friday night. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lee Esser.
Good evening again. Thank you. Before I begin with our celebrations, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and apologize for a comment I made earlier regarding our school-based health centers. As a special educator and a disability advocate, I'm deeply sorry for the flippant comment equating the long-awaited start of our school-based health center project with aging and wheelchair use. It was not my intention, but the impacts of my words were harmful, and I am so very sorry. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared that with the group before I took time to celebrate our culture and our climate. So thank you for your grace and understanding and allowing me to take this opportunity to apologize for that mistake that I made. I have learned from it, and I appreciate you all. All right, let's jump into some fun things with our students. I have the pleasure of sharing some culture and climate celebrations through pictures. You'll see Toki Middle School is prioritizing and centering restorative justice principles to support their students in non-punitive ways, opening up what they're calling a green space, where students will have the opportunity to connect, learn, grow, reflect, and make plans for the future. Lakeview is centering culture and climate using outdoor spaces for students to learn and grow. They set up a whole storybook walk around the property, which was enjoyed by students and staff alike. I too loved the outside orchestra, I think it was orchestra concert photos that they had as well on their beautiful outdoor campus at Lakeview. Toki also was is part of a big idea through the ESSER funds, and they are working to improve the educational experiences of our students, particularly BIPOC youth and those who identify as LGBTQ+. Ultimately working to make space that meets their needs, student needs, and addresses their well-being. Mendota Elementary School held a kindness retreat for fourth grade students. Students and staff had the opportunity to come together and engage in games and community building. Alice had an event called Mercado where students created art to sell to families, and each classroom created something to present at the Mercado. And lastly, you can see this photo, it's just too cool. Sandburg had an event called Carne Asada, which was essentially a big end year party celebrating their community, and had a great turnout. And I can tell why if the food tastes as good as it looks. Next slide. So in the wellness update I provided, or the health services update, I did provide data around the culture and climate survey, but really wanted to highlight it here as well. Oops, I gotta get to my right slide here. As you know, we will be sharing more comprehensive data around culture and climate shortly once we're able to look through and make sense of the data on the 3 surveys. I did want to just give the group and the community a quick update on our initial look at the student survey. We know having a relationship, safety, and belonging at school is critical. When we served students earlier this year, or this spring, I should say, they shared the following information. 93% of students agree or strongly agree that a teacher wants them to do really well in school. 80% of our scholars feel safe in their school, and 75% of our scholars feel like they belong. I want to enter this sort of glass half full and glass half empty sort of from that perspective. 80% of kids feeling safe at school is excellent. That is a high percentage, and I'm concerned about the 20 as well. So I just want to name that we want to build on our strengths and what we're doing well for 80% of the kids, our scholars, for the remainder, similar to the belonging. We also continue to invest in culture and climate through our resources. So this year there were 6 new counselors and 4 RJ coordinators in our high school. And as you know, we will be continuing to add staff to our school-based student services teams next year as well. We've talked quite a few times about Care Solace. I'll just highlight this once more. Care Solace is a mental health navigation program, and there have been this year 280 referrals, warm handoffs, so essentially Care Solace to a provider, and 100 people in MMSD who have had at least an initial appointment with a provider. As I think most of you know, the access and availability of mental health services and supports in our community is significantly less, probably supply and demand issues, and so any appointment is a win and a victory, and we're grateful for that. Lastly, we are Bounce Back and CBITS are our small group interventions for students who have experienced trauma. Bounce Back is at elementary. We screen 1,780 students at elementary, mostly at the 3rd grade level, and nearly 2,920 at the middle and high school levels. Then any student who comes up as having concerns are connected to an intervention and support from a licensed clinician. And I will hand it off. I think I'm handing it back off to Cindy. Is that right?
That is perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Woof. So you heard just, as people said, a small portion of some of the accomplishments to date. We're going to open it up for a discussion, but before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jenkins to close us out, and then back to Board Member Castro.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you again to all the board members for giving us this time to bring this type of an end of the year report. And I know when we look at traditional successes, sometimes we do not necessarily account for all the other wonderful things that's really making this schooling experience really helpful, not only for students, but for staff and for our community. I could not close this out without saying I'm still having a heavy heart about what has been happening in our communities just around the country. And I said it at the end of my talking to the community that we really are in some troublesome time, and we have to give more love. I think it's a strategy. My putting the love up is acknowledging the great things that are happening with our students. And I think sometimes as a part of healing, as a part of making things better, we have to overpower it with love. And our students need to know that we see them. Our staff need to know that we see them in our community. And more of us wake up every day with great intentions rather than bad intentions. And I really appreciate Dr. Esser, you stepping back up right in front of everyone and correcting your previous statement. That's someone who cares. And we have a staff full of people who really care. We have a board that cares into our community. I hope that you too take pride in a number of these things that we've shown you here today. And as we continue to emerge from this, we are going to get better. Yes, we made some mistakes. I will be the first one to tell you your superintendent makes a lot of mistakes. And I thank all the people who are around me, who hold me up and hold one another up so that we can move forward in the best interest of all of our scholars to be the best that they can be. So thank you, Ms. Green, you and the team for the great presentation that you guys shared tonight. You all shared tonight, and let's have a discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins, Cindy, Dr. Esser, all of our associate superintendents. Let's get started with questions and or comments. I think I saw Board Member Vandermillen raise your hand. We can start.
And Jesse, I'm so sorry, real quick. Jesse, could you take us off screen share just for this portion? Thank you so much.
I just have one very quick question, and for some reason I'm off screen, but that's okay. But my question is just for Nancy Mofender on the paid employment for disabled students. Are those all competitive work jobs or any non-competitive work jobs?
Great question. They are all competitive jobs in the community at minimum wage or higher. So yep, nothing less for sure. Thank you for asking though.
Thank you. Can I explain to the group that question about it? The reason I asked the question I did is because most disabled can be paid as little as 4 cents an hour because we are not subject to the Fair Wage Labor Act. So it is common now to ask if it's competitive work employment versus sheltered work employment to make sure that individuals are getting paid for the work they do.
Thank you. Board Member Duncan.
Thank you. I have one request and a question. My request is for the anti-racist IEP criteria. I am really interested in seeing that and seeing how that compares to what we have been doing. And I'm wondering if we can get that sent to us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question as well. I believe the Board of Education had gotten that information earlier in the year, but prior to your coming on board. So I will be happy to send that via Jesse Gagnon, and I can do that sometime in the next, maybe this evening, maybe in the morning, but very quickly.
I really appreciate that. I mean, that's been obviously a long time coming in our history that we've needed to have that happen. So I'm excited to see that. And then my second question is related to AVID. I know that AVID is demonstrating a lot of success, and I'm wondering if we currently have waiting lists to get into AVID, or if we are able to serve all students who are interested.
That's a great question. I will let Langston Evans answer that. In general, it varies a little by school, but he can definitely give you more details on that as a start. And Associate Soups can also answer that if needed. But Langston, you want to go ahead and answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. The simple answer to that is, as Cindy said, the AVID elective class is only one piece of how we're using AVID in the district, but there's a great deal of interest. And so in some cases, there are students that are interested that don't experience the AVID elective class. So that there are, in some cases, waiting lists.
I think if I may just follow up on that. So I want to make sure I understood. So is that they're interested, but they chose not to sign up, or that we didn't have space for them?
That they may not be able to join at this time. So there's an application process that happens, but there's ongoing opportunities for students to fill seats. So sometimes students aren't able to fill the AVID elective class at the time they first apply. In many cases, particularly in our high schools, students are able to join in at a later point.
And if we look at next year, do we have anticipated the same situation? Or I know that there was some increase in capacity. What are we looking at for next year for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's still ongoing placement for students. There's certainly movement within our schools. When we look at all 15 schools that have the AVID elective class, there may be some students that aren't able to get into the class this year. We don't have those final numbers yet.
Board Member Simkin, I would just like to add at the middle school level, it's similar. There is, based upon the level of allocation that we have, limits the number of students who can participate. And yes, there are some wait lists. And as students move out, we do invite scholars off of the list into the classes as they become available.
Are we able to get an idea of the size of the wait lists?
We're happy to provide more information and also provide a little bit of a historic perspective in terms of where we've had larger number of students on a wait list by school and where the fluid nature comes in, but we're happy to provide a more detailed report for you.
Thank you. Board Member Nichols.
Yes. First of all, let me just start off with appreciations for your presentation tonight, and for one, lifting and leading with stories. It's, I think, an important part of how we help show all of the things that are happening inside schools that are very hard for most folks that aren't in them every day to understand. So I really want to thank you for bringing stories of our students and lifting those up. I very much liked the land acknowledgement video. That was really nicely done, and love the fact that we are in this movement to get the plaques and to really acknowledge the land that our schools sit on. I think an important part, and I know you will agree, is that beyond just the plaques is also the curriculum and educational part. And so we do have Wisconsin Act 30, which is the teaching of the Holocaust and other genocides, which is the social studies curricular requirement. And that is supposed to be updated by July 1st of 2022. So at some point, not necessarily tonight, I think it would be great to get an update on how that social studies curriculum is going, so that we're doing more than just the acknowledgement, but also doing the education that all of our students deserve. The other thing that I noticed in your presentation tonight is that you talked a lot about the conditions that seem to help our students learn and thrive. I heard a lot of examples about affirming identities, the power of family partnership, the strength of celebrating students' achievements, and collaborating with community. And I think those conditions are critical for students. My question, as you are thinking about the academic plan and the strategic recalibration moving into the future, is how do we better ensure that those conditions are more systemically created and nurtured across all of our schools? And you don't have that, there's nothing for you to answer to tonight. I just wanted to lift that up because unfortunately, I think we see a lot of variance across our schools. And so while you lifted up some great examples of individual schools or individual students, that ends up oftentimes being an inequitable experience for too many of our students and families. So I want us to be thinking systemically about what would it take for us to really create those kinds of conditions in more of our schools and classrooms. And then I'll follow up with just a couple things. Thank you, Chair Castro. The one thing you didn't notice, didn't mention in your presentation tonight was the investment of time and energy of our staff to complete the letters professional learning. And so while you mentioned the curriculum adoption, which is great, there's a whole ecosystem around teaching our young folks to read. And so I think that was it's a missed opportunity and maybe something that you'll want to go back and include later. The other thing you did not mention is that we did a critical investment in helping to mentor new teachers. I believe there's been an investment of time and energy in leadership training this year, I think. But I didn't hear anything around any of the systems for professional learning and supporting staff. And while I appreciated that most of your presentation was focused on students, which is what it should all be about, we also know that without our staff being nurtured and supported along the way, we don't get the outcomes oftentimes that we're looking for our students. So please don't forget them. I want to tell you about an amazing opportunity that I would love to see you all grab a hold of. We had a West High School graduate about 4 years ago. Her name is Diana Murray. She was, we used her at many of our leadership institutes as an inspiration. This graduate selected education as her field. She went to UW-Madison. She just graduated in May. Many of you may know her, and she's already been hired to be a 6th grade teacher at Sherman Middle School. I want y'all to grab a hold of Diana Murray, and you need to showcase her because she's one of ours. She's one of the first Team Scholar graduates, and she's coming home. And this is more of what we need to talk about. And there are other Team Scholars out there that haven't quite finished yet, but she would be an amazing story to highlight about how, as Langston was talking about, that post-high school pathway and us building our own talent pipeline. Diana Murray is an amazing example. All right, now, here's the last thing I will say. Culture and climate data I'm just gonna be honest with you, Dr. Esser. And I know the data is still emerging. It's just not sitting right with me that 80% of our scholars are saying, I am safe at my school, and that 75% said, I feel I belong. I'm looking at the budget book for 22-23, and we have the 2020-21 climate survey results. I know it's still emerging, and I want to be proven wrong. I want to be proven wrong. But let me just say this to the administration. We are going to have to embrace and accept whatever the culture and climate surveys tell us, because we've been through a year and a half of a pandemic. And if the numbers are low, it tells us something about the experience that folks are having. And it's not a judgment, right? It's like, it only will help us redesign a new response and to look at our system holistically and as we design a path forward. So if those numbers are as positive as you say they are, I will come back at some point and apologize. I'm just telling y'all right now, something about that, those percentages seem extraordinarily high based on what I'm hearing, but maybe things are better than I know. Thank you. I know I took a lot of time.
Thank you. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for these presentations. Like Nichelle, I truly appreciate the snippets of the events that are happening in our schools to bring celebration, to bring experiences to our students, and highlighting that at the elementary, the middle, and the high school. I really appreciate that. I did want to say, sort of building on what Nichelle is asking about the culture and climate data, I was surprised to see just tiny snippets of the academic data come through as well. We had Achieve 3000 level set diagnostics for just one school. On track, 9th grade, data point for just one school. On track to graduation, one school. And I really do think it's really important for us at the end of the first year coming back from the pandemic, where we had our students in person, to set a new baseline for the academics and know where we're at. We've been talking about that a lot. And so I guess my question for you is, when you're bringing this data back to us, what are we going to be seeing? I know that we have the Achieve 3000 for middle school, high school. What other data points are we going to see? How are we measuring the reading levels in our elementary school? How are we measuring math levels? I feel like we sort of got lost along the way in the middle of COVID with what we were able to measure and how we were able to measure it. And I'm trying to, what I would really like the context of is how we got back on track this year with our own evaluation and our measurements to set a new baseline for our students. Because again, wherever we're at, that's the point we need to start at to go forward. And I really appreciate Nichelle talking about the conditions that we're creating for our students to learn. But from my perspective, we really need to take a comprehensive look at that academic data to know where we're starting. And Cindy, maybe you can give us a little background on, what we're looking at, overall snapshot for the data coming to us.
I will be happy to, and I will also see if Dr. Jenkins or others want to chime in. So first, thank you, Board Member Nichols, for all of your pieces. One thing that I just want to note is Diana Murray was one of our early contracts hires that we did through that signing day. So yes, that is amazing, and we will continue to leverage that amazing young person. Thank you, Chris. So two things that I want to point out is that data that is shared tonight was emerging data and is in progress, if you will, because the school year has not closed out. What you will get in August, to remind everybody, is we do have a whole set of strategic framework metrics that we will use to provide that end of year report. So forward, that the state requires, measures reading proficiency. So you will see that for grades 3 through 8, math proficiency as well. We have graduation completion rates that you will see. You will see ACT data. So that list, I can definitely make sure we provide a reminder to the board in terms of that full list of strategic framework metrics. But those are the items that we'll be able to report out when we receive that data back from the state, which usually doesn't happen until July, which is why early August is when we will come back with a more comprehensive update. But let me see if Dr. Jenkins wants to add anything to that or others.
I think for the most part, you're saying it accurately how I would describe it. I would just also say to the board members, and that's why we had this last slide discussion, because we want to hear those things. We couldn't include all the successes we've had this year, but I think we've been so much in the last 2.5 years of this pandemic. All of us are like looking just at what's in front of our nose just a little bit, to we forget some of the wonderful things that we've learned through this pandemic. We said we were going to lean forward together, and now we're trying to build momentum. We only highlighted some things that the various associate SUPs may have thought been important to their areas. I have 1,000 more things I could have lifted, and I really appreciate the part that you said about the professional development and how the time staff had to give up to do letters or whatever we decide to do. The many wonderful things that tough decisions you all have made as a board. We didn't lift all of those. We lifted some of those things. And I think at the end of the year, we're being celebratory, reminding us that there are some things that have been accomplished. But when we come back in August, we want to lay that out, but we don't just want to lay out the accomplishments. I think through this budgetary process right now that we're going through, we're also talking about some of the challenges. And those challenges be that I can't miss a conversation without saying, the 0 and 0. I can't miss a conversation without saying that those are things that destabilize public education. But I think it's our opportunity to say too, that we're still leaning forward and making things happen for children, for our scholars, for our staff, and for our community. So I think all of your questions, in particular around the specifics around the data and showing it systematically, I think that's critical. I would be disingenuous if I didn't say, as an educator during the pandemic, we've all experienced a higher degree of socio-emotional and mental health, which I think we've covered, like the $6 million investment. We haven't covered it all, but we made some investment in that area because we know everything is not well. We can't pretend everything is well with our students or with the adults or with our families or community. But I wanted to say at the same time, we have to begin to say, and I think, Chris, you brought this up about the metrics discussion, okay? Within the metrics discussion, yes, we know we're in a pandemic. Yes, we know that the mitigation strategies and all those things are necessary, but how do we begin to move forward to bring some degree of excitement back in our lives? So I'll just say that piece, but Cindy, from a traditional data standpoint, we're gonna get those various data points in August, but I hope that we can even learn from that. We don't need just the traditional data points, because it's going to really be a reinforcement of a lot of what we already know that really depicts us in a very bad way overall and doesn't give the whole child. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. And I have somehow gotten bounced out of the video of this meeting, so I'm hoping you can still hear me, even if you can't see me. I'm glad Dr. Hicks is on here. I see you on screen, Dr. Hicks. I wanted to ask you, there was a picture in the middle school, Simpson Street Free Press. I know that they have been working really hard this year in engaging students in those extra academic type experiences that they get to do through journalism. Can you tell us just a little bit about the partnership and that particular picture?
So that actually was a picture from the Henderson renaming celebration, and those scholars were there writing story for that. And the partnership with Right Free Press continues to grow and be well. And it and actually, there are several satellite sites. There's a site at Henderson, there's a site at Wright. I want to say there is a site also at Elementary, Bethlehem, and Hawthorne. So there are some sites around Madison. Scholars are still writing wonderful pieces. Simpson Street Free Press is doing a great job of giving our scholars phenomenal experiences broadly, not just in our community here in Madison, but across the state, getting them the exposure of writing and communicating and being and understanding the purpose of writing for practice, for practical application. So, Jim Kramer, who's the director of that program, has been a partner with us for years.
Thank you so much for explaining that. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Any further questions? I had two quick questions. In the parent empowerment group at, what was it, Chavez School, can you explain what makes that parent involvement group different from other PTOs?
Sure, I believe it was at Van Hise, and I'm gonna see if Carletra can come back on and talk a little more about that.
So Van Hise actually has two parent groups. So they have a general parent group, but they also have a parent empowerment group for parents of African-American students. And so that group is meant specifically to create space, opportunity, and voice for those parents. And so that was what we were highlighting. That group started in 2020. And again, is led by Ms. Chanel, who is an SEA, and she's doing some phenomenal work with that group by bringing parents together. They actually went on a trip together. I think it was to the jumping, I don't know the exact name of it, y'all. And then also had an activity and game night at the school and provided dinner, again, and opportunities for parents to connect also with each other. Did that help, Board Member Castro?
Yes, thank you, and I'm sorry, Board Member Muldrow, Board Chair Muldrow, your hand.
Do you have one more question?
No.
Okay. Cindy, my questions are going to be directed primarily at you. Chris, I want to thank you for speaking to the data that we see specific to students. I have a question about Achieve 3000 specifically. So for a long time, I've really struggled with the data we get around Achieve 3000 because of what I hear students saying about how they feel about interacting with Achieve 3000. A teacher at West High School recently did a survey with over 1,000 students asking them to talk about their relationship with Achieve 3000 and their relationship with Lexia at the high school level. If you're going to give us additional information about the results of Achieve 3000, are you also going to pair that with the survey that teacher did?
Yeah, so that survey was across the schools, and we're happy to provide more information on both what students have said their experiences as well as where staff are in terms of that. In addition to that, I think it will be important when we provide that update in terms of what our intent and use of that data and that resource is as well. But happy to do a deeper dive into that, President Muldrow, if needed.
Cindy, is there anything in that survey that was conducted by an educator and given to students across schools that would make us rethink our investment in Achieve 3000?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. I have been working very closely with our high school English chairs as well as the curriculum and instruction department to think about our use of Achieve 3000 next year, both in terms of a assessment screener to provide us with literacy data for students in terms of where they are when they enter into high school, as well as kind of progression throughout the year, and also as a potential supplemental resource for classrooms. So those conversations have been happening. We also met with MTI last week to discuss this as well, and are kind of taking all that data in to think about the direction for next year. So I don't have an answer for you. I would say that through this data collection and some of that, that is where we're considering next steps.
Thank you so much. I have two more questions. I really appreciated that you all broke down for us on slide 16, kind of what the enrollment looks like in the elementary program for virtual learners. I want to thank Dr. TJ McCray for all the work he did on that elementary program, especially because that really came together rapidly. We hadn't anticipated needing that program to the extent that we did. And he was able to create a program that I think a lot of families really needed and deeply appreciated. That being said, the enrollment did shift from 517 at the beginning of the year to 374. That is not a small number of students, but I'm curious about how we're using that information to anticipate what the elementary school enrollment in virtual learning, or I'm sorry, online learning will look like next year. And the other question I have very specific to that is, how are we giving kids academic credit for demonstrating their ability to engage with technology while learning virtually?
So I will let Carletra start on the MVE parts, and then I'll come back to that second question.
Thank you.
And thank you, board member. That was a misstep on my part. And so thank you again for lifting the work that Dr. TJ McCray did in conjunction with, in collaboration with the elementary team. So much appreciation for that. The enrollment for MVE fluctuated a great deal during the year, mostly because we wanted to be responsive to the needs of parents and of scholars with MVE. And so again, while there was a significant shift from how we started, and again, the numbers that we had for second semester and where we are now, we were excited that we were able to return students to, or have students return to in-person instruction. We did and have been meeting with Dr. TJ McCray as we bring both programs under one umbrella of Madison Promise Academy to determine how many students will be served in 4th and 5th grade. We're also doing some additional outreach. As a matter of fact, during our 5th grade promotion ceremony today with MVE, thank you, board member Pearson, for being the keynote speaker for that. It was a wonderful event. We actually, again, made sure that parents were aware of the opportunity for Madison Promise for next year. So learning many of the important lessons that we learned from MVE this year, and bringing those to Madison Promise for next year and how students will be served. So we have been in collaboration and partnership with Dr. McCray, and we will continue to do that throughout the summer as this program is becoming up and running for our scholars.
And President Muldrow, would you mind?
Did you need further information, Board Member Muldrow?
No, I very much appreciate your answer, Carletra. I do want Cindy to answer the question about how we're giving kids academic credit for their ability to interact with and navigate technology.
Yeah,
Okay,
could you say a little more outside of the courses they're taking? You're talking about just the functionality and what they do every day through the.
Right. So if you think of the computer as the tool, and a young person is mastering that tool, this is a skill that's going to be relevant to their ability to engage in the workforce. It's a skill that is strengthened through virtual learning, and yet we're not grading students on that skill. We're not measuring that skill as far as I know. And we're not giving kids academic credit for the initiative or ability to master a tool that is a computer. You know, especially our young people in elementary school who, you know, have really advanced their capacity to work with technology during this time. We've talked a lot about learning loss. We haven't emphasized the areas in which our students have actually strengthened their understanding. How are we?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for clarifying that. We are not giving credit for that at this time. I think you bring up a really good point for us to take back and think about, both at all levels as also in terms of what that might look like for high school Carnegie credit units as well. But that isn't currently happening outside of the way we identify some of their skill development through our traditional report cards. So I appreciate that comment.
I really hope when we have this discussion moving forward that we really do start to recognize our young people's ability to navigate technology. And we start to measure their growth in that area, because I think it's significant to their learning, it's significant to their ability to interact with the competitive job market of the future. My last question is also about the culture and climate survey. And I guess it's more of a comment. I think asking our students whether or not they feel like they belong is very different than asking our students whether or not they see their identity as part of what they're learning, whether or not they are reflected in their books and materials in the classroom. And so I hope that we have a question that broadens what we're saying when we say, do you feel like you belong? If you don't see yourself reflected in who we're calling a mathematician, who we're calling a scientist, who we're calling an artist, that's a problem. And our young people are keenly aware. In fact, part of what came out of the land recognition was young people saying, we're sick of not seeing ourselves in our curriculum. And so I think we need to gauge who sees themselves in our curriculum and who does not. And I think we need to reconcile that through truth and reconciliation. And that's my last comment. And thank you, Chair Castro, for the time.
All right, Board Member Nichols.
All right, thank you. I just have one quick follow-up. For the students that have been in the Madison Virtual Elementary Program, Ms. Sanford, are they still getting the same elementary report card? And does it signify anything different that they were virtual for maybe half of the year or a portion of the year before going back? I know the elementary report cards, if I'm not mistaken, were kind of, wasn't it like developing, emerging? I can't remember the letters, but like, is that report card style still happening? And yeah, just overall wondering how a virtual portion of the year might be reflected on their report card.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Nichols. So yes, they did still receive that same report card. What teachers were able to do is to indicate in the comment section of the report card their length of time in MVE and the work that they had done in MVE. So in addition to just the standard piece of any additional information specific to MVE.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on to agenda item 6.1, extension for the MOA with the Early College STEM Academy Partnership. I believe on hand for this one we have Cindy and Langston.
Yes, that is correct. We will move on to our second topic of the night. Jessica, can you share the slides? And could you just skip forward to right here? Thank you so much. All right, good evening again, everybody, and on to our second topic. So tonight we wanted to bring forth a discussion around two of our high intensity partnerships, both AVID TOPS with Boys and Girls Club and the Early College STEM Academy with our partners over at Madison College. And this is to provide a high-level overview and then to have you vote at the end of the month on a one-year extension for both of these MOAs. The main reason we are interested in an extension is because both of these partnerships started right around when COVID hit or right before when COVID hit. So both of these partnerships, while we have had great impact and success for our students, these high intensity partnerships also require an evaluation at the end of the MOA cycle. And because we haven't been able to really have a full year of data and or learning without some of the disruptions of COVID, we wanted to create a one-year extension for both of these in order to have one more year to provide a more thorough and comprehensive evaluation. But with that, we're going to just give a high-level overview of each of these for any board member that may not be as familiar. So I'm going to first turn it over to Langston Evans, who is our Director of College and Career Readiness, and he manages this high-intensity partnership. Jesse, could you go to the next slide, please? And one more, please.
Good evening again, board members. And so I just want to go through a few slides that ground us in what AVID TOPS is with the district, the power of the partnership, as it were. I know many of you have some familiarity with the partnership. So this is meant to be a cursory overview, but really make sure that we ground in that. And so just the why, which is not what's on this slide, is why we do AVID TOPS is because we know that we want to provide systems to give our students what they need to be successful. And all of our students, particularly those that are in the middle and those that have been historically marginalized in our education system and society. And so with this partnership, what we do is we boost high school success, college readiness, and post-secondary degree attainment for first-generation college students. And we know that this works, but we also know that during the disruptions, as Cindy mentioned, we haven't been able to fully evaluate what we've been able to do in the last 3-year cycle. So we were asking for a 1-year extension to our current memorandum of agreement so that we can have that opportunity for a thorough evaluation and reflection about what's working with this partnership and how we can leverage this to support all of our MMSD students. Next slide, please. The history of AVID TOPS, the partnership between Boys and Girls Club and the Madison Metropolitan School District goes back to 2008, and really before that when the conversations began. The reasons and rationale why we need to lift up our first generation college students, our students of color, and our students who come from families with limited economic resources is not a new story in Madison. But the AVID TOPS partnership from a community school partnership want to address that in a holistic fashion, to address students not just as students, but as members of their community, as they can discover who they are and connect with opportunities that go beyond high school. And so as you can see through this timeline, which I will not speak to every point on the timeline, that we started with 75 students in 2008. And now we have over 1,500 students in our 7 through 12 programming. We have over 900, almost 1,000 students in our AVID TOPS partnership in our high school. But what's even more impressive and important as we move through this timeline, we realize that just providing students with an opportunity to have high quality, engaging instruction with relevant material and adults who care about them was great, but we needed to hold ourselves to the measure of what are we doing to support them after high school. And so with the Boys and Girls Club, we support over 700 students who are in college, who are working on their next step with college coaches and support and resources. And so this is how we have grown this from one classroom to a 7 through 16 support system for our students. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of the numbers. As I mentioned, we have the high schools, which is our 4 comprehensive high schools, which are our AVID TOPS students. And our middle schools, we have the AVID elective class in 11 of our middle schools. Just 2 of them are represented in the partnership. And then we have Badger Rock, which is implementing AVID school-wide. I would like to note that we have really focused on maintaining that in this, we are targeting this class for services for students who need it, but we are applying what we are learning in the AVID TOPS elective class for all students in MMSD. Next slide, please. And so how does the partnership work? You've got a little vision about the why and what we want to give students what they need. That we were looking for this boost in academic performance, connectivity to their schools, opportunities during and after high school, and how that's connected to their lives and who they are. And how is really through a very, very refined and integrated partnership. with Boys and Girls Club, who are wonderful partners and invest a great deal into our school and community to make sure that all of our students are successful. Specifically through the AVID TOPS program, you can see in this Venn diagram the resources that we provide. In general, MMSD are providing those teachers and counselors that implement a system of learning and connecting knowledge for students. The Boys and Girls Club, being in the community, they're bringing in mentors, they're bringing in career readiness. We've got 70 students that are doing internships just this summer, being managed with Boys and Girls Club, our AVID TOP students. College coaching, which I previously mentioned. I should also mention that the Diana Murray, who we talked about earlier, was an AVID TOP student. And her success, being prepared to take that step at UW-Madison and being prepared to connect her learning and come back to MMSD, also part of why the partnership works. Together, we provide college tutors, field trips to colleges, guest speakers from our community. Some of you have been our guest speakers, and I thank you for that. And then in college and career readiness, which we celebrated our over 200 seniors who have chosen where they will go to college next year. And I want to thank Board Member Castro for being the MC of that wonderful event. Next slide, please. So just to highlight some of the impacts, and I could highlight so many more, but I've been told there's a time limit. AVID TOP students have higher attendance and GPA than their similar peers. We've done one of the most rigorous evaluations by the University of Wisconsin, and consistently have shown that the students in this partnership they're having these experiences, not just in the classroom, but also connected to what they're doing in their lives, have higher GPAs, a higher attendance. We've had 100% graduation rate in our AVID TOPS seniors for the last 4 years. And over the life of the program, our seniors graduate at a 99% rate. Currently, 84% of our AVID TOP seniors take one or more AP classes. And our AVID TOP seniors, and going back to this evaluation, which we had done by the University of Wisconsin, our AVID TOP seniors are 25% more likely to enroll in post-secondary than their similar peers. So peers that look just like them in the 8th grade, except for that they did not have the AVID TOPS experience, they are 25%, there's a 25% gap in whether they are going to go on to post-secondary education. Our researchers and evaluators said they had not seen anything like that, any of the research done on college preparatory programs across the US. And our alum have earned over 250 college degrees, and we're counting. And so we believe in the impacts of the program. We believe it's powerful, not just for the students who are in the AVID TOPS elective class, but AVID TOPS provides the energy and synergy to be a model classroom about how we connect systems in our schools, community partners in our schools, and so we can learn and leverage that across our schools. And so that all students may not be in the AVID TOPS elective class, but because of our partnership with Boys and Girls Club, because of the resources we're able to bring to bear, we are learning things that we are able to create experiences for all of our students that are powerful, and that are meaningful, and that lead to outcomes that present them with opportunities and pathways after high school. And so next year, we will have our third-party evaluation and really examine closely our data and how we have experienced the AVID TOPS partnership through a pandemic. There really is no precedent to understand how this is impacting our students and how that what we've learned during these unprecedented times might carry us forward. I also want to note, and you did mention that we are adding a third freshman section at Weston Memorial for the 22-23 school year. And this is to meet the demand of our students who are experiencing really positive outcomes and experiences and relationships in the AVID Tops elective class. And our plan is to grow. Currently, this year we had 8 sections, 2 per grade level in West and Memorial. And then our plan is, as we add a 3rd section for the 22-23 school year, to add a section in the subsequent school years until they build to 12 sections. And then we're also using our AVID strategies to support connections and alignment with not only the AVID elective class, but to support all of our students in secondary with literacy, social emotional learning, and culturally linguistically responsive practices. And we know it's through the alignment we've been able to do in the AVID Tops elective classes that have provided insight and opportunities for staff to take that to their colleagues and for parents in our community to understand what that can look like, sound like, and feel like, to have a connected experience in our schools. And so that is why we are proud of what we are moving forward with the AVID Tops partnership.
Could you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? Thank you so much, and thanks, Langston. I am going to quickly run through the Early College STEM Academy, and then we will pause again for any discussion or questions. So the Early College STEM Academy began in 2018, and we are currently in the middle of our high-intensity partnership memorandum of agreement. Could you go to the next slide, please? And just a reminder of what the Early College STEM Academy is. It's a dual enrollment opportunity for our students while they are in 11th and 12th grade to take college courses full-time over at Madison College in the areas of STEM or STEM-related fields. So students earn not only the high school graduation requirements that they need to earn a high school diploma, but simultaneously are earning college credits along with the high school credits. We have a target population really focused on students of color and females first to really grow those groups of individuals in the STEM and STEM related fields because they're underrepresented. In addition, we know students that are able to access and take advantage of college coursework while in high school are able to persist and at a higher rate in post-secondary. So we want to ensure that that is an opportunity for our students. We also focus on students that come from a first-generation college-going household and students that come from a low socioeconomic background. Next slide, please. So while we are going into our 4th cohort, we have had 3 cohorts thus far. Our first cohort only started with 25 students over at East and La Follette, and then in the second year grew to access across all 6 of our high schools, and we had entered 100 students at that time. We have now grown that any given time we have 200 11th and 12th graders in the Early College STEM Academy. And to date, we have had 199 students graduate. I was able to attend the graduation a few weeks ago, and it was the first time we had an in-person graduation, which was super exciting. All of our other cohorts had some impact of COVID, and we had to do a virtual graduation. We have 200 students currently enrolled for next year. And we have had 49 of our students earn an Associates of Science. That means they are graduating with 2 degrees in hand, right? A high school diploma and an Associate of Science. Huge, huge, huge game changer for our students. On average, our students have left the Early College STEM Academy with 48 college credits. We've had 168 of our students that have attended the Early College STEM Academy be part of the Phi Theta Kappa. That means that those students have to carry a 3.5 GPA or higher while they are in the Early College STEM Academy. 58% of our students thus far have been identified as female. 54% of our students are identified as a first-generation college-going student or the first in their family to attend college. 52% of those students come from a low socioeconomic background, and 77% of our students have been identified as a student of color. So that is just a glimpse of the data. We have provided full end of year reports to the board in the past, and we'll be providing an end of year report to the board in the next few weeks when we have our final set of data. Could you go to the next slide, please? So I am going to pause here for a discussion or any questions. So I will turn it back over to you, Chair Castro.
All right, thank you so much. Any board member comments or questions? Board Member Simkin, followed by Board Member Nichols.
Thank you.
Followed by Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Thank you. So my first question, I guess I have questions about both programs. I'm really excited to see how successful they both are. And so I want to make sure that we're learning from both of these programs and figuring out how we can use what we're learning to help all of our students. And so my first question is, for the Early College STEM Academy, are we seeing a pattern of classes that the students are taking? And have we considered offering some of the more popular classes at the high school?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. The short answer is yes to both. We want to begin to grow the course offerings on our own campuses that apply for dual credit. So what I mean by that is students are able to earn both high school credit, and then the course also earns them dual credit. Currently, we have many courses that run in our CTE area. We have a few in reading and language arts and in math that students are able to access on our campuses, similar to the same ones the kids in the Early College STEM Academy take. We want to grow that. One of our areas of need to grow that is what we call qualifications for our teaching staff. So in order to have a course be a dual credited course, there's a different set of qualifications that the Higher Learning Commission requires than what a DPI would require for K-12 certification. We want to provide more opportunities for our staff to become qualified so that we can run more of these courses on our campus through what I would call a universal access, right? Easier for all of our students to do that. We are in conversations right now about thinking about that for certain programs like the Education Academy that Madison College offers that could happen there, as well as thinking about where we would need to partner with Madison College for what I would call adjunct professors, where they could come teach on our campuses in the event that there's courses that we do not have qualified staff for. So that's a little bit of a longer answer, but I would say yes, this is definitely in our future plan about growing those opportunities, and specifically in the areas of English and math, because those are courses that we think have high impact for post-secondary and also are transferable to most post-secondary institutions as well in the content area of English or math to offset the requirements that they would have to take in a post-secondary. Are there certain courses that students are interested in? I would say yes, but I don't have a named course I could tell you right now. There's about 6 different STEM pathways that students can take over at Madison College. Health services is one, IT is another, manufacturing is another. So our students do a lot of universal courses that first semester of their 11th grade. And then after that, they start to take courses in the area that they are interested in exploring more, the STEM area. So I think all courses they've found interesting, but again, for us, some of those more general English and math courses are the ones that we want to think about more deeply for universal offering in MMSD. I hope that answers your question, and I didn't say anything that was confusing. Okay, great.
No, it wasn't confusing. I'm actually surprised you didn't raise up computer science or IT as being something that we could be expanding on.
We have dual credit opportunities already for computer science and IT in our schools through our CTE courses, as well as industry certification opportunities. I am happy to share kind of more detail at a later date for that, as well as many of our students take advantage of Madison College academies that have an IT programming opportunity through what's called Start College Now, which is state legislation opportunity for students to take college coursework while in high school. So we have a kind of a few different ways that students access that in that area specifically.
Okay, okay, that makes sense to me. So, and then my second question is, again, going back to AVID and TOPS, I'm wondering if I can get a sneak peek as to what you think that you're learning so far that we can be expanding throughout our schools. What are the successes that you're finding so far?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple because I think we have learned a lot over the years of implementation, and I'm remiss to not have thanked the board for the years of investment that Madison Metropolitan School Board has given to this partnership and to those students who really need and value that investment. I would say there's a couple of areas. One of the things that when we listen to our students, and we're able to have focus groups of our students every year, and not just look at the data, the numbers, the quantitatives, but also understand the stories behind that. It is when our students are successful, it's because their learning is connected. We've been able to create a community that allows them to understand and value and express their identity, and have adults that actually have high expectations with high amounts of support. And both of those things are important, and that's what we've learned. In some spaces, we are able to take those learnings from our students and from our AVID community and our partnership, and provide opportunities for more students. For example, what experiences do all students need in college and career and community readiness to help them make their coursework or classes feel meaningful in both middle school and high school? And we're learning how to expand what we are doing for all students, whether it be through an advisory or whether it be through opportunities off campus that engage our students. We've learned that because we've been doing that in the AVID TOPS partnership for 14, 15 years. And so now as we are working with whether it's youth apprentice students or creating opportunities for our middle school students to go onto a college campus, we've been able to leverage what we have learned working with our AVID TOPS students. And so the sneak peek to me is really now that hopefully we're in a new phase of whatever this pandemic is, we can re-engage in that connected type of learning, connecting students' identities, experiences, and beliefs about their future to what they are doing in the classroom.
All right, thank you so much, Board Member Nichols, followed by Board Member Gomer-Schmidt, followed by Board Member Pearson.
All right, thank you. I'll try to keep mine short. I noticed for the AVID TOPS high intensity partnership agreement, the current one is 2019 through 2022. You're asking us for a 1-year extension. Is the 1-year extension just so that you can get to the 3-year evaluation? Or is there any other reason why it's just the 1-year extension? Is it to be with, I guess what I'm asking is, I know we have a board policy on partnerships and high intensity partnerships, the evaluation piece of that. And so I guess is the 1 year just to get us to the point where you all can do the 3-year evaluation?
Yes, and it also allows us to draft and reflect on a new MOA or updated MOA language when we are not, when we haven't had a chance to have a year that is more normal. So we didn't feel prepared or comfortable drafting a renewal based on what we had seen for the last couple of years, we also didn't feel like that data, if we collected it this year, would have reflected what we wanted to learn.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So when we get the board item later this month, will it also come with, I guess, a contract, or is it just the MOU piece?
Yeah, I'm happy, Langston, I'm happy to answer that if that's okay. So it will not come with the contracts at that time. It will have just the current MOAs if people are interested in looking at what the current MOA is, and language just for a 1-year extension. Contracts would happen after that, and we'd go through a revision of this MOA just to extend it for a year, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. One more quick AVID related question, and then just a real quick logistical question about the Early College STEM Academy. So for AVID, I mean, a big part of the AVID model is having AVID tutors. And yet we closed schools and told people externally they couldn't come in, and you know, for COVID protocol and mitigation. I guess I'm curious, how did our, you know, need to kind of close schools from external volunteers, did that impact our AVID tutors? And are we on the upswing? Are we returning back to AVID tutors if we had lost that for a while?
Yes, it significantly impacted our AVID tutors, but I want to lift up how amazing and flexible and adaptable our school staff were. We shifted to virtual tutoring.
Oh.
So, but because of the schedule shifts, we weren't able to offer the same intensity of tutoring that we had in the past. So it was a significant difference. Also, because of the availability of tutors, students mostly, and the students were more scattered when they were doing virtual learning, it affected the number of tutors we could hire. We are on the upswing, I'm happy to note, and we were able to second semester this year return to in-person tutoring, but with the appropriate protocols that were in place to make sure that everyone was safe. We also, in this time period, explored and really went deeper into peer tutoring and allowed our leadership of our students to really allow them to be both teacher and learner at the same time as they're developing their leadership. So we tripled the amount of peer tutors that we had. We instituted universal peer tutor training in our AVID elective courses to continue to build out that model as well.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. Thank you for that. For Early College STEM Academy, correct me if I'm wrong, I just looked in board docs. It looks like the last high intensity MOA partnership agreement that the board had was in November of 2018, and it was a 4-year partnership agreement that would be ending this June. Ms. Green, is that typical for the Early College STEM Academy MOU, that it's a 4-year MOU to get a couple of cohorts through at a time, or will it be coming back to a 3-year? Yeah.
That's a great question. I can't answer if we'll be coming back to a 3-year. We do have Dr. Larkin that was just hired, who is over strategic partnerships, and I know he's kind of using some time to orient himself and think about the future. So I don't want to speak to that. But yes, Nichelle, it was our first and only MOA with Early College STEM, and we decided to do a 4-year, which was something we hadn't done with our board in the past. We had always done a 3-year, but we were trying to be clean with 2 full cohorts going through, since it was our first partnership agreement with them, and so we wanted to try and gather as much information as we could on 2 full cohorts before having to cycle back again for a renewal. So that was kind of the intent of the 4, and that is correct that the first time we came forward with this high intensity partnership was November of 18.
Okay, great, thank you. So I just would like to just say to Chair Castro and also to Dr. Jenkins that I do think it is time for us at some point in this upcoming school year to come back to a conversation about our strategic partnerships policy. That original policy was created probably back in 2014 or 15. The district was in a completely different in a different place then, around not really having a good handle on all of the partners. I think that we put a lot of burden on our high intensity partners to do these three-year evaluations, and we're more than likely going to renew them anyway. And so I just think that we should get to a place where we are more community partner friendly, we are more progressive in our collaboration, and really save that energy and those dollars for things that might give us a bigger bang. So maybe that can be a topic that we can discuss in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I cannot agree more. Board Member Nichols, you certainly bring a lot of experience and expertise in that regard. So thank you. Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. And my first question is about the AVID tops, and I have the report from 2017-18 pulled up that was done with WCER and the Wisconsin Education Collaborative. And it had like 4 guiding research questions that were part of it. I'm wondering, as we look to do this again in the external evaluation, are we going to follow this model that we already have? And are we planning to work with WCER and WEC again to do this? Sort of extending what we've already done and adding in additional questions?
Thank you for that question. We definitely are going to be learning from what we have done in the past. At this juncture, as we go into the next evaluation, we are sending it out for a request for proposal. And so we want to see what expertise that we have from evaluators. I think those core questions are guiding questions in terms of what are the impacts for our students. And so I don't anticipate those being different or changed, but we are going through the process right now of accepting proposals for the evaluators.
Okay, great. I just want to say thank you, and I see your name on this evaluation, so I want to say how much I appreciate that you are involved and have been involved in the longevity of this program going forward. And so I guess, like Nichelle, I would also like to see the memorandums of agreement to take a look at what those entail for the high intensity partnerships. Yeah, that was my one question about the AVID. So thank you very much on that. My question on the early college STEM is around, I guess in the same way, are we looking at doing an external evaluation of this? And just a quick question about this whole thing started in connection to the Pathways program. Are these only Pathways students that are having access to the early college STEM Academy, or is it any high school student? And how do we see this sort of connection going forward? And I guess another question is, when is the whole larger discussion of Pathways coming back to us?
So I'll start with the first questions. This is not necessarily directly connected to Pathways and was not directly connected to Pathways. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. In terms of the evaluation, we will consider an external evaluation. That is a conversation that we are going to have with Madison College, and it is also kind of wrapped up in our policy process, and we'll be engaging in that conversation this summer. All students across the 6 high schools are invited to apply to the Early College STEM Academy. The first year it was limited only to East and to La Follette, and that was really due to proximity to Madison's Truax campus. That was the year prior to Goodman South being built, and as a reminder, one of the main goals of Madison College Goodman South was to have a space for this Early College STEM Academy. So what the first year where we had 25 students, it was limited to those 2 high schools, but the year after that, it's always been opened up to all 6 of our high schools. Your last question, I don't have an exact answer for you right now. We will be thinking about the instruction work group calendar for next year, now through the remainder part of the summer. I think definitely in conjunction with you and also led by Chair Castro. So more to come on that question.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question really quick. We have 200 fewer students in our high schools because of students accessing the early college STEM. And I have heard this asked before by previous board members. How does it affect has it affected the class sizes in our high schools or electives that are available or anything like that? Or are they so spread out among the high schools that the impact is small? It's quite a few students once we get up to 200.
Yeah, I would say overall the impact is small because of the number of course offerings we have and because of how students are spread across the 6 schools. So on average at a given year, you might see 30 students from a particular high school that are attending the early college STEM Academy. And if you think about the number of course offerings that happen. So we haven't seen direct impact in terms of the class size yet. We did create through a model of trying to think about our sustainable budget and how that was going to work with our high schools and their allocation. We did provide that to the board in the past, and I'm happy to share that again to how we were thinking through the funding model for this, if that would be helpful. The one additional thing that I just want to mention that I'm not sure, because I didn't say it in the presentation, and it reminds me, Chris, when you asked that question, is we do have 2 of our MMSD staff members that teach at the Early College STEM Academy, and that was part of the original design and intentional to ensure that we were thinking about both the Madison College teaching staff as well as our staff. So it's really exciting that we have 2 of our own that are over in the Early College STEM Academy as well for part of their time.
Okay, thanks for that info. Cindy, and I would appreciate the extra information you said that you have to share with us. That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Board Member Pearson.
Thank you. I'll start with just the STEM Academy since we were just talking about that. I know that we've had this conversation a lot, Cindy, about how are we connecting our middle schools to programs once they get to high school, and having those options for middle schoolers, because they're kind of the group that gets left out from all of the conversations around external partners and partnerships and programs and such. And so, yeah, that's pretty much my question is how are we connecting the STEM Academy in ways that middle schoolers have access? I know when I was in middle school, I took like algebra in 7th grade at West High School and then went on and did some other stuff. But I don't know if that is still something that is happening. But it'd be great to see or know more about if those options are still available to our middle schoolers.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Board Pearson. We're going to talk a little bit later tonight about high school credit and middle school, so I'll hold that piece. But we are trying to do a few things. One, we're trying to just do better information sharing for students while they're in middle school, because one of the things we've learned is waiting for students to find out about this opportunity in the middle of 10th grade sometimes is too late, both in terms of how they're thinking about their own high school trajectory. So that is one thing. In addition to that, we're doing something right now with a few of our community partners about STEM and IT opportunities for middle school. So we're starting a few this summer through our director of CTE and Pathways is working directly with middle school students. And then we are looking at a program that is helping us collect data on our students in middle school that are interested in IT and or STEM and focusing on underrepresented. We're seeing that we have many more students that identify as boys that are interested still in IT and STEM. And so we're collecting this data and then working with some of our community partners to create more opportunities for some of those underrepresented groups. So those are just a few things. We are at some starting points. I'm excited about getting back into doing a lot more of this as we're kind of coming out of COVID, I would say, and starting with a few programs this summer. The coursework opportunities exist for our middle school students. I'm going to talk a little more later about some changes to our policy that we're really excited about that I think are going to create more universal opportunities for students. And I think that question can come back up again if it doesn't get answered in that part.
Okay, and then my next question, or I would just say a comment about the STEM, is that I think one thing that we need to start looking into is being a little more innovative and not necessarily focusing on just IT and STEM, but more so of like where technology is moving into AI and Web3. And finding ways that we can be innovative. I think that that's an opportunity for us to attract more students, but then also give young people a path to something that is still being developed, like, you know, middle school age in MySpace and being CSS, like coding and putting marquees on your web page and all that stuff. And I think somehow getting our youth to understand that, you know, the next wave is now Web3 and artificial intelligence, and figuring out ways to invest in that as well. So yeah, that's just a comment. And then going to the AVID TOPS program, I'd like to know just like what the racial background or breakdown of the students that are part of that program. And then also how many of those students that are accessing that program are on IEPs. My last question for that is just, we said that 70 of the 900 students have access to summer internships. That's only like 7% of the students. How are we ensuring that more students are having access to internships? Because I think that for a lot of students of color, at least in Madison, they might be helping with their family household income and things like that. And so how are we making sure that they're paid internships and not just only experience internships?
Those are great questions. Let me try to take them in the order in which I remember them. Okay. Firstly, the demographic breakdowns of the students currently in the high school AVID TOPS partnership. We have 10% of those students identify as Asian, 27% identify as Black or African American, 43% identify as Hispanic or Latinx, 10% identify as multiracial, multi-ethnic, 9% identify as white. In terms of students with IEPs, we have 7% of the students who are in the high school AVID TOPS elective class have IEPs. In terms of the internships, you bring up a wonderful question. And so one of the things I want to say is that the internships are only one of the career experiences that our AVID TOPS students have access to. And so there are multiple ways that our students are accessing career experiences. There's a digital career experience program that is targeted to our sophomores. And in fact, all the students who are interested in that are able to engage in that. And then there's a variety of others that we can share with you. But we have, there's 2 levels of career exploration, one for 9th and 10th grader. Each of those students all get stipends. There is building opportunities for student success that's open for 9th through 12th graders. Those are also, those students also get a stipend. And then there's a variety of internships we talked about in that number. And then through our partnership with Boys and Girls Club, they have social media ambassadors, which are students that want to take on leadership opportunities. And those students make $15 an hour. So yes, at this point, working with our community, we would love our community to have more internships and more investment in our youth, particularly our first generation and college students. And so it's a call out to our community to join us in this work and join us with Boys and Girls Club to provide these opportunities. but we are providing what we can with the resources that we have and trying to give students a variety of opportunities so that when they get to the internships, they've had previous experiences and have the tools and skills to be successful in those internships.
Yeah, thank you for answering all those questions. And I'm glad to see that breakdown. It'd be nice to see that like in the future, just for both of the programs, because I think it is important to have that context of like who we're actually reaching, especially students with IEPs. Like we know that, you know, there are a large amount of students who have the IEPs who are not, who I would say, not necessarily recognized as having the potential to do some of this sometimes with some folks. So it'd be great to make sure that they have access as much as possible as well. And I would like to see the number increase, like you said, and have our community partners come along board with us and have more internships for students, because it is important for them to have that quote unquote real world experience and career exploration. So thank you.
All right, is that it?
I did have another question, but I'll just ask it later.
Okay.
Or I can just say it and then you guys can figure it out later. But I know that Boys and Girls Club is a Dane County program. And so I was just asking of just how are we ensuring that the AVID TOPS program is serving MMSD and is it serving our other schools and school districts in Dane County area? But you don't have to answer that now, you can follow up.
Thank you. Board Member Vandermolen.
I want to elevate what Maya said. 7% of students with disabilities being involved is quite low. I would like to see larger amount. Also on the paid internships, which Maya raised, there's a statistic which I probably have said before, but I will say it again, that providing 2 paid work experiences for disabled individuals triples the opportunity for them to work in the community in a competitive work environment. And they've shown that in high school. Therefore, I think it's crucial that these internships be there, and people do expect certain things. I.e., they assume incompetence often first. But we have some great employers in Dane County. One actually in Fitchburg, Liliana's, has 12 individuals with disabilities on staff. It's one of the best ones, and their model is wonderful. I strongly suggest that we work with businesses such as that to try and provide those services, because our students need actual real work experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have one quick question for Langston and or Cindy. I'm wondering, you know, in the coming year, what plans or thoughts, actions do you have to further develop AVID at the middle school level?
Yeah, I'll let Langston answer that, but just as a reminder to the board, AVID at our middle schools for us as a district is in 11 of the middle schools, and then recently added to Badger Rock as more of a universal model based on their structure. But Langston can chime in a little more here on details if he has it.
Yeah, this will be a little bit of a recapitulation, Board Member Castro, but one of the areas in our middle schools where we are really doubling down our efforts is connecting what we're doing in the AVID and in our middle school 2 partnership schools. It's College Club, but the Boys and Girls Club partnership is the College Club, AVID College Club partnership, is how students are accessing information and affirming their identities outside the classroom. And so it's through leadership opportunities, it's through college and career experiences. One concrete example is that there has been a past practice for our AVID classrooms to bring in community speakers, but they're really not just bringing people to have students understand what they do, but build a curriculum around how are we developing inquiry around what I connect with to what we are bringing into the classroom, and making that experience something that we then do further research about. And that is something that we are bringing to classrooms outside of the AVID elective class in our middle schools, and to content area classrooms and advisory classrooms. And so that's just one area where we are trying to take our years of experience and our resources that we are able to have with our partnership to learn about how we can connect our scholars to their learning and their futures in a more positive and engaged way.
Thank you.
One last thing I would add to that Langston didn't mention is the focus on our early literacy and beyond as a district, and thinking about how we're going to leverage AVID critical reading strategies next year as a universal approach across our middle school classroom. So we're really excited about that as well. What's happening in our middle school AVID elective class and in our high school AVID elective class, how we're spanning that to all of our classrooms as a universal strategy to support all of our students is just one additional thing. Sorry, Savion, I think I accidentally cut you off.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I was just gonna say the sooner and younger we can expose our students to these career opportunities, co-curricular opportunities, and mentors in the community in those roles, I think is the better to just really nurture their imagination for what's possible in their life. So thank you. Moving on, we have two proposed policy changes tonight. One regarding the BEP and the other regarding our students in middle school being able to receive high school credit. And so I think we have Cindy on task for that for sure.
Yes, Jesse, if you could please share the slides again. Our last topic of the evening. Thank you for hanging with us. Can you go to the next slide? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you got to go backwards. I apologize. Right there. I'm going to turn this over for the first one on the behavior education plan to Dr. Leah Esser.
Good evening again, everyone. Let me just grab my talking points quickly. All right, I am going to quickly talk through a few slides related to the behavior education plan. So to begin, I just want to reiterate the guiding principles that we hold tight to when we think about the behavior education plan. These principles have remained constant since the start of the BEP in 2014 and remain concrete, tangible, and thoughtful grounders as we consider culture and climate and behavior in MMSD. Additionally, I want to just reinforce and share the goals of the behavior education plan. There are three. One is to increase the number of students, families, and staff who feel safe and a sense of belonging. Two, to improve the successful development of foundational practices. And three, reduce disproportionality and exclusionary practices for our Black students and our students with disabilities. So we continue to hold tight to those principles and those goals and are constantly reflecting with them in mind. Next slide. So as we've talked about a couple of times in this meeting, there will be full data available on a variety of topics in August, I believe. The BEP will be one of those areas where we will provide you a comprehensive assessment or analysis of the year's worth of behavior data. I want to just center us on where we've been and where we are going. As we continue to navigate the complexities of two pandemics, racism and COVID-19, next year we're really working to center social emotional learning and mental health and recalibrating our foundational practices that we know work. So when we look at the BEP, really thinking about goal 2 and getting regrounding and regaining our footing given all of the disruptions related to the pandemic and the pandemics. Additionally, I want to take you to thinking forward. Thank you to ESSER funds and to all of you. We are able to pull together a representative group of community partners, providers, and school and district staff to engage in really comprehensive visioning and implementation planning around culture, climate, behavior for 2023 and beyond. So one strand of that comprehensive work and reflection will be on the behavior education plan, informing substantive and transformational changes to the behavior education plan. You can expect that we will give you updates on our progress with that visioning and implementation planning throughout the course of next school year. Additionally, we anticipate substantive, as I said, substantive and transformative changes to the BEP as we reach the almost 10-year mark of this policy in our district. Specifically tonight, next slide, in your packet, you will find a comprehensive summary of the recommended changes to the BEP for 2022-2023. A red line, an actual red line of the policy will be provided to you when you vote to approve the recommended changes. Right now, you have a grid for elementary, middle, and high school that mocks that up for you to see. The changes to the elementary BEP you will find to be the most substantive. As a reminder, the board voted on a moratorium for out-of-school suspension in October, but that was an addendum. It wasn't incorporated into the BEP. So we needed to go in and remove references to out-of-school suspension for elementary students, with a couple of exceptions related to expulsion and mandated required expulsions with a suspension that would go along with that. So really working throughout that document to clean it up and remove elementary out of school suspensions. You'll notice that a couple of the progressive discipline charts are not there like they are in the high school and middle school behavior education plans. Those will be redeveloped and that reconceptualized as a part of our big edit. But really, given the way that those are structured right now, it's really about intervention, in-school suspension, and out-of-school suspension. And because there's not an out-of-school suspension option, it's not the most helpful tool for our elementaries at this point. So you'll notice that. Other more substantive change is related to Title IX. Since the BEP was updated in 2019-20, I'm not exactly sure the timeline, but there have recently been substantive changes to the Title IX regulations and how we address sexual behaviors and sexual contact. In particular, our big edit is the update of the progressive discipline graphic for sexual contact. We actually repurposed that and it will instead outline the Title IX process and what happens at each phase. So that will be clearly documented in the BEP, and you'll be able to see the intersection between Title IX and behavior and how and when we proceed through the Title IX process, how and when we proceed through the BEP process and where they relate, et cetera. Also, in addition to that, we're more clearly delineating behaviors with Title IX expectations. So you'll find we're trying to move behaviors that are Title IX related together, highlight those, and redirect people back to the Title IX procedures. You'll also see a serious misconduct related to sexual behaviors as an addition to the BEP. That is there in order to give the Title IX coordinator and decision maker the latitude and authority to apply the consequence as determined appropriate by Title IX versus just the BEP. Lastly, I just want to highlight some small minor changes. We survey staff and we collect feedback annually related to the behavior education plan. Much of what we hear is practice related and things that we can provide buildings to make their experience easier and student outcomes stronger. So for example, I lost my train of thought. Let's just jump into the small changes. So we survey folks to just really have an understanding of, the practice guidance. So we would apply and provide additional practice guidance concepts, but little was needed or shared with us from schools as it relates to specific behavior response levels. A couple of small things emerged. Elementary, leaving the school building without permission used to be at levels 1 and 2. If you recall, level 1 is classroom teacher handled behavior, and 9 out of 10 times a student who leaves the school building is not going to be supported by their teacher in that moment, but instead they'll be supported by an out of the classroom person. So moving that up to more authentically align it with the BEP. We also find there are middle school scholars who choose to leave the building for a variety of purposes, similar to their elementary peers, and an obligation of safety and learning and engagement. We need them to stay on campus. And so there was the request to add that option as well. As a reminder, that when we are documenting behaviors such as this, it's not just or exclusively to apply a consequence, but rather to track a trend, to understand a student's experience and be able to use data to support them differently or better. So if we see a middle school student who is leaving the building multiple times a day, what is happening in their world? What is happening at school? Why? Like, and being able to dig into that more intentionally will also be very important. And then lastly, the seriousness of setting a fire or attempting to set a fire. I believe there have been a couple of incidents this year where elementary schools felt very strongly that the severity of the behavior and the safety risk that it poses would benefit from a change in levels to push that up one level. The last thing I'll speak about on the next slide is just the work that we're doing next year related to implementation planning. The policy is one aspect, but really what is the real work is really in that practice and implementation. So we really want to think about, as I already talked about, that deep, comprehensive school culture and climate visioning and implementation planning. We need a roadmap for all of our work and a true picture of what it takes to implement the BEP, but more importantly, what it takes for our scholars to feel like they are safe, welcome, and belong in our schools. So we are going to tend to that larger systems issue as we move forward. The other thing I want to just reinforce is, and I talked about this earlier, about getting back to the basics and building our foundation. So really thinking about our data practices and recalibrating our data practices and bringing our student services staff back into the fold for professional development, making sure that they have access to all of the key learning and resources they need to implement foundational practices in their schools. And then lastly, we want to keep expanding and increasing our alternatives to suspension options. So thinking about meaningful alternatives to discipline that can be implemented in a school that not only allow a scholar to reflect on and address anything that they are experiencing or have experience in their school and learn a different way or surface an issue, all sorts of things, really wanting to get at the root of issues as opposed to simply removing students from the classroom. We are a teaching and learning institution, and any behavior, any challenge is an opportunity to learn from our mistakes and try things differently. So a big focus on our practice next year, really regrounding in what we know works and ensuring that we are constantly and authentically expanding alternatives to suspension and learning opportunities for kids. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Board Member Mve Enrollment.
Yes, I'm a bit disturbed on the BAP. It's been here 10 years. It's better than the code of conduct. I will agree with you on that, Holly. But what I have to admit, it still doesn't work. And our students who are most vulnerable are the ones who are getting bullied, the ones who aren't feeling safe at school are the ones who are paying the price off it. And I have a problem with that. Any plan of the behavior education plan needs to be formed with the board who writes the policy, not the administration. It has to be done with us together because we can't be a comprehensive, coordinated, well-oiled machine if we can't work with our administration together to create a document that is best for our students. That can't be voted on at the end of a month. That takes several. Two, I'm worried, I'm going to take one example. I'm worried on the raising the punishment on walking out of class. You take a student who's been bullied, who runs out of class because they've been bullied and goes outside. So what's the next thing that's going to happen if they get disciplined, if they're outside? Either A, they'll be afraid to come to school, or B, if you're Black, brown, or disabled, the police are going to be called because you're a nuisance. Are we really willing to do that to our students? Because that's what's going to happen. I've practiced criminal defense for 16 years, almost all of it juvenile. Our kids behave the way they behave because there's something wrong. They are expressing emotion and they're expressing trauma. Sometimes they're expressing their pain in the butt. Okay, I can deal with the last one. But I don't want to lose the ability of our kids to actually talk to us by focusing on what level their behavior falls under. When you deal with codes like this, you can end up causing more harm rather than not. Already, we have increased we were not even fully in school this year. We were in school for most of it. Here's the problem. We have an increased number of seclusion and restraint data on elementary students. I'd rather focus on that. Why are we secluding and restraining third graders, fourth graders? Why are we doing that? Shouldn't we be focusing on the behavior of the people in the schools as well as the children to create a safe environment? Not trying to stand at a soapbox or give a speech here, but if we're going to do this and make this BEP work, we have to do it together. We have to do it right, and we got to work on this on retreat together as a unit. We can't pass this piece by piece. It doesn't work that way.
All right, thank you, Board Member Vanderbilt, and I see Board Member Simkin up.
Thank you. So being very new to the board and to the system, maybe I'm really off base, but I'm really surprised at the lack of urgency around this. I think that the behaviors that are going on in our classrooms are incredibly impactful on our teaching staff and on our students' ability to learn. And I would want to see much faster movement on this than looking at waiting for another year to make the changes. I recognize that there is a really big disconnect between the policy and the implementation piece. And so I appreciate that you're recognizing that. And I think that as board, we need to know, if there are resources that are making it so that you cannot implement the policies as they're written. I have a number of questions. I'm gonna say them all and not expect that you're gonna answer them right now, both for the sake of time and because each one of these could be a full conversation. First of all, I'm assuming that the policy related to the use of cell phones or computers for leisure activities by students in the classroom is covered under the use of unauthorized items. Okay, so I'm seeing a yes for that. And so we have in place a policy already that says that students should not be using any non-educational required device that detracts from or disrupts learning of oneself or others. This policy is often not implemented in classrooms, and I want to know why it's not implemented. And that's not to say that teachers are doing it wrong, but I assume that they don't have what they need to be able to implement this. And this is greatly impacting the learning of students. It's also impacting the experience that teachers are having. I've talked to a number of teachers that are incredibly disillusioned and frustrated by the process of being in the classroom because they only have the attention of several students in their entire class. And I think that this is something huge that needs to be addressed this summer. I don't think this is something that waits until we work on implementation, over the course of next year. We need to talk about the disruption of these devices in class. I also want to lift up the data that was shared earlier that only 80% of our students say that they are safe in school, which means 1 out of 5 students do not believe that they're safe in school. And I think this has got to be connected to our behavior education plan. So we need to know why. We need to know what's going on. We need to address this. I find it really unacceptable that 1 out of 5 students say they are not safe in school. That's scary. Can you imagine if you were working in an environment where 1 out of every 5 people felt that they were unsafe? Adults don't put up with that. And I think we owe it to our children to address that now and figure that out now. The same thing around the statistic about feeling like they belong. 1 out of 4 students don't feel like they belong. And again, that could be connected to a lot of things, but I think we need to look at how the behavior education plan connects with that for a quarter of our students. Next. I am interested to know, and you started touching on this, Dr. Esser, what the self-assessment data and the intervention data tell us about the implementation of the behavior education plan to date. And I would like to know what adjustments have already been made based on that data and what adjustments can be made now based on that data. Next, I'm hearing that we're going to be doing some robust data collection practices, and I'd like to know what data you are collecting. Because at a minimum, I would like to see anecdotal and qualitative data on what additional supports teachers need and school staff need for this effective implementation of every level of the plan as it exists right now. And with a special focus on the actions that are supposed to take place in the classrooms without additional staff support. So those level 1 interventions. I would like to see how often each of these consequences are happening. And do we have data on that change over time? Also, I'd like to see data on the impact of restorative justice efforts. What has been collected to date? What have we learned? And what have we adjusted based on that data? I'd like to know when restorative justice is happening. How many students have been involved in restorative justice process? And what are the metrics that we use to determine that it's successful? I'm also interested in, as you're changing a lot of the wording right now, or the process to using in-school suspensions. I'd like to know what happens during an in-school suspension at each level. And then for level 2 offenses that refer to a mobile response system, I'm wondering with the staffing shortages that we have and that we might anticipate for next year, how might we be adjusting for next year to the category 2, where we may or may not have individuals in place to be able to be responsive when needed. And I think I'm at finally. Yep, finally. I looked through the elementary school one pretty carefully and was really confused that we are including four-year-olds and fifth graders with the same set of consequences. When developmentally, we know that 4-year-olds aren't at all in the same category as our older elementary school students. And so I think it is critical that we relook at that elementary school plan and decide whether it is even appropriate for our preschool children to be included in it. And so those are my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would like to remind board members that we can send emails for when we have a comprehensive list of questions. Additionally, we are noticed for a few narrow changes to the BEP, and board members can certainly request
That was my fault, sorry.
more broad conversations about the BEP. I think Cindy had a comment as well as Dr. Esser, and then board member Nichols, I see you, followed by board member Gomes-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Castro. I think you said it. I just wanted to remind the board that tonight we were focused on a few of the policy shifts that we are going to make, and can definitely work with Chair Castro if we want to bring this back for a larger, more comprehensive discussion at a later date. I do know Dr. Esser was going to chime in, and I know our associate soups are here as well to provide additional information if needed, but just wanted to kind of provide what that update for tonight was about. So thank you.
I just want to share two quick things. Board Member Simkin, I know we still have an onboarding meeting at some point for you as a new board member. So some of these things I can help contextualize, but I'd be happy to provide answers to the board in general. I also just wanted to mention and again reinforce, this is not about a lack of urgency. It is the reality being that we've not lost our focus, but our focus had to shift due to COVID. And as we think about coming back next year, we really just need to reground in what we know works and what our schools need in order to make that happen. So much of the issues with the BEP, or almost all, if not all, are related to how we implement. So the first half of the document, as opposed to the dots and the grid. And so while I recognize and I hear you, from the urgency perspective, I actually think one of the things that we have done wrong in the implementation of the BEP is just react and respond and go too quickly. So without strong consideration of really what will work and what our schools need, and how we do that in a coordinated and thoughtful manner. So I do completely respect that sentiment, but I do want to just reinforce the importance of us getting this right, as opposed to doing it quick. My dad always says, the hurrier you go, the behinder you get. I think that's actually a famous person and not him, but nonetheless, wanting to really think about that as well, and that level of intentionality that we need to put in place in order to do this right.
Thank you, board member Nichols, followed by board member Gomes-Schmidt.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to also just keep my remarks concise. I want to just say that I am trying to respect the fact that as a governing body and as a board member, I am being presented with policy and some policy revisions that you have, outlined. At the same time, the behavior education policy is very detailed about the how, right? And so it is very hard for me to take just the policy revisions that you have brought forward without thinking more deeply about the how. So I will just say this, and I will follow up with an email, so don't feel like you need to respond to anything tonight. I do need you to know that I'm not certain that I could vote for this this month, later this month at this board meeting, because there are some critical things in my mind that have not come forward. One is I am concerned that we are talking about policy revision without data. Data informs not only some of the policy language, but also some of, in my opinion, what you might be shifting and changing in response to behavior. So without the annual climate survey data that goes directly to goal 1, I have some hesitancy. Related to goal 2, there is a lot of language around the kind of teaming that needs to happen at schools, right? And, you know, my concern at this point is I'm not sure how many of the teams that are outlined on page 7 are still in place. I don't know if teams have actually had times in school to meet and to also have school-based professional development that they're leading. I think we have faced so many shortages with staff. I'm concerned about the contingency plan. Like if we were to come into next year and we did not have all of the BEAs or the other support staff that are needed to make this policy kind of come to life and to reground, as you said, Dr. Esser, what would be the what ifs? What might we shift and what have we been learning in particular this year around some of the things that have been the hardest or the most challenging for staff to respond to and that we've seen from our students. So I'm trying not to get into implementation because I know that's your role. But I think I have questions that kind of impact the policy piece of this. And so I just wanted to be clear about that. And so there are a couple of areas within the behavior grid that I'm wondering if you've had a little bit more insight about, particularly around disruptive and uncooperative behaviors. I don't know that that would shift any of the response levels, but I don't know that we've had that conversation. And if you have had it previously and I wasn't present, you know, my apologies. So I can send an email with more specific questions, but I just wanted to let you know that, yeah, I'm not sure that I would feel ready to vote on this. Although I do want to say that I think what you've outlined, the things that you have outlined are very clear. It just feels like there's still something missing. And so to me, maybe it's a matter of timing. And maybe you could just share what the implications would be if there was not a vote that passed in June.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's exactly what I was going to jump in and say, Nichelle. I know you don't need answers to everything. Here's what I would recommend. I do not feel wedded to any of the changes on the grid, like in the response levels, those sort of things. The two things I feel really strongly that we need to address. One is just codifying the moratorium on suspension at elementary. So adjusting and making those changes to make that live for real. The second thing would be to align to Title IX to ensure that we are in compliance. I'd be very comfortable saying that the other items can wait until a future conversation when we can give the board a more comprehensive look at data, practices, and just an overall BEP sort of reorientation. So we could be very flexible in that, but I would encourage us to try and get those two items addressed so that we can move towards training and updating all of the resources that need to go to families.
Thank you for that.
All right, Board Member Gomez Schmidt, followed by Board Member Muldrow, and then Board Member Vandermolen.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just want to state that I agree with the guiding principles of the BEP, and the BEP, I think there has been general consensus that it was good in theory, but there have been huge challenges, as you all have acknowledged tonight, with the implementation. I guess what I'm surprised with tonight is that we approved an addendum to put a moratorium on out of school suspensions at the elementary level this year. I was expecting when this came back to us that we would definitely have data about how that has been working this year. I'm sitting here with a BEP report from 2019-20, and it has it broken down, like even just the number of in-school suspensions, the number of behavior events. Like, we don't have anything that you have given us to show us what these changes in policy have done in practice in the schools. There's page 17, it talks about alternatives to suspension for 4th and 5th grade, but it doesn't give any indication of what those actually are. And so I guess I'm needing more detail before I would want to codify something like this, because I think having the addendum is in place to have changed the practice, right? But I don't feel comfortable making a bunch of changes that codify this and switch like the progressions and everything without actually knowing how this is working in our schools and the effect that it's having. So I do want to better understand the data. And I think that's a really necessary step before we go in and make all the changes to the elementary, BEP. I understand with the Title IX changes being necessary to get us into compliance. And match that up. I guess, some of my questions that I have written down is, when we take away or change and make out of school suspension no longer an option, what are we doing for those level 3 and level 4 behaviors? Like what are the alternatives to a suspension that are happening in our elementary schools? And is it consistent across all schools, or are schools kind of making it up as they go? Or are they at different levels of practice based on the expertise of the building principal or the leadership or the staff? And so I feel like I have many more questions than I have answers, and I don't think I would be ready to even vote on the codifying because I feel like we have it in place in order to have put some things into motion, but we need some information about how it's been working this year.
All right, Board Member Muldrow.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Neil. So I want to hone in on the areas that we talked about changing specifically. So we talked about changing our relationship to Title IX and sexual assault. The greatest preventer of sexual assault is education. The age of consent in the state of Wisconsin is 16, which means that developmentally it's understood that young people have a hard time navigating consent. How is our process in response to sexual assault, sexual violence, unwanted physical contact developmentally appropriate? And what are we doing on the front end to prevent sexual violence? How are we giving young people information about consent? How does our sex ed give young people the tools to prevent this before we talk about, punishing interactions between students? I'll direct the question at you.
Did you say me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought. Sorry, I was just slow to unmute there. It's a big question that you're asking. And I want to do it justice here, but I'm going to probably do a quick high level summary. The BEP is built on the idea of teaching and learning. And so our obligation is to put our resources and our efforts into prevention and proactive work. Consent culture being one aspect of that. It's no longer acceptable for no means no. It's this concept of yes is yes, and that we need to teach that and reinforce that in our schools. And so we are, as a team, a cross-functional team, not just my department, but thinking about Title IX, safety and security, et cetera, working to comprehensively consider what that preventative work looks like and where we draw in our community related to that. So reinforcing just the teaching and learning being really important. As far as our response, I think that I'll just reinforce the importance of us thinking about Title IX and holding the investigation and the sort of decision, weighing that equally with the importance of supportive measures and ongoing supports for students. So it's simply not enough to investigate and discipline, but we have to recognize that sexual behavior and incidents regarding sexual contact or actions are incredibly impactful on young people and can change the trajectory of their world.
Yeah, I want to emphasize how we have a developmentally appropriate approach to sexual assault and sexual violence, and giving young people the tools that they need to report sexual assault and sexual violence, as well as addressing that in ways that are developmentally appropriate. It is different for a young person who is developmentally 9 years old to come into contact with the parts of a body covered by a swimsuit versus a young person who is 15 years old developmentally. And so really leaning into how does the policy you all are asking us to adjust and our relationship to Title IX, how is that coordinated with developmentally appropriate approaches to teaching and learning around, assault and consent? So thank you for speaking to consent culture. I'm hoping to just get kind of a little bit more information, if you can follow up, about kind of the link between what we're teaching and how that is developmentally appropriately tied to a response when these behaviors take place at different ages. The other thing I want to talk about is fire setting, in part because it makes a lot of sense to me that we would take setting a fire at school incredibly seriously, right? So the idea that we move that from level 2-3 to level 3-4, I think makes a lot of sense. However, I've looked at data around behaviors in schools for a long time, and never has starting fires been one of the dominant behaviors happening in schools. Sexual assault also is not a commonly reported behavior within our schools. Under the Student Code of Conduct, the most common behavior reported was insubordination. Under the Behavior Education Plan, the most common behavior reported has been dishonesty. So the students we don't trust and the students we want to dominate, and those students just happen to be African American on a regular basis. In thinking about it like that, I'm wondering how many instances of students setting fires in schools we've actually experienced or seen this year in terms of justifying this shift, and what we're hoping a more severe punishment will do to discourage young people from setting fires. Is there any data that would show if students are aware that they are going to receive a more severe punishment, they are less likely to engage in starting a fire at school?
Point well taken, President Muldrow. I think what we know about suspension is that it doesn't work to change behavior. It is an opportunity for some recalibration and planning, but the data does not show that it impacts student behavior. I can't speak to the specific data right now, but can share that we are responsive to feedback from those school principals and staff who are implementing the code, and that feedback came up a couple of times. But I do, your points are well taken, and as I said previously, we would be comfortable setting those aside for the time being in order to really think through this more comprehensively.
Thank you so much. That's it for my questions.
My first question is, with the Title IX, is that going to be affected by the Will lawsuit depending on the outcome of that? That's my first question. My second one is a comment, but can you answer the question first?
I will defer to Sherry Terrell Webb or Sharice Perry on that one.
The Will lawsuit will not have any implication on updating the BEP to be in compliance with Title IX requirements.
So you wouldn't make us remove our welcoming school or anything if that came down the other way, correct? I didn't think so, but I wanted.
No, that's not included in the BEP. What we're talking about is the fact that we implemented a Title IX policy without updating the BEP to provide a level of discipline that is required by the federal government with regard to Title IX.
Got it. Okay, that part I understand. The comment I have is this. Our students are sexually maturing at younger ages. We're in a culture in which bodies and consent have become very important topics. And very simply, kids need guidance, not punishment. I'm really worried that if we increase punishment on certain things we're going to punish biological urges of people, of non-binary, of trans students, of students who are just trying to figure out how their body is working, period. And I worry about that. Since I've been on the board, and this is the controversial part, so please don't throw anything at me. But since I've been on the board, we've had two former staff members arrested for pornography, and one who was accused of putting a camera in the East hotels. If I can't expect the adults to do it right, how am I going to expect the children to without any guidance? I need to guide these kids into what they should do and how we can help. Because right now I have teenagers who are terrified. I got kids who are going, is school safe? I'm afraid I'm gay. This is a problem. I had 2 clients last week. By the way, Ali, I will send them to G-Safe because they're terrified. And I don't know what to do. So I'm hoping that we can discuss this without rushing it, I can't vote on this. I know we need to be in compliance. I'm an attorney and I get that. But I can't do it yet. Not without a lot more evidence and a lot more ways to be alternate. If we can find the alternatives to discipline, the alternatives to suspension on these things, then I think I could be more positive on it. But as long as that is on the table, I have a really, really hard time. But that's me, and thank you for forgive me for anything that may have sounded inappropriate. It sounded better in my head.
Thank you. Dr. Jenkins, go ahead, and then I have a few questions and a comment.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for all the comments, because this helps us begin to calibrate again in terms of where we are. And I'm glad that Dr. Esther said she would meet with the new board member in terms of trying to just bring up the snuff, but most of us have been around now. And this is what we have, when we're coming out of the pandemic and we're really concerned with social emotional, mental health, and even some of the behaviors and acting out. But I think Chair Mulder was going in a space that I think we all need to come back and re-engage in terms of knowledge is what's happening, but why it's happening and how it's disproportionately happening. And I just want to caution us on rushing to increase our response to a young person's choice by suspension. Really, I just want to caution us, because I know how the justice system responds, and has that been beneficial to us? I know how we have responded prior to the pandemic. And I asked, let's look at that data. And was that really, really responsive to our scholars? I think we have an opportunity, be it not perfect with this BEP, because I have some questions too about it. I think Board Member Vandermiller said about us looking at this together. I think we do need to look at it and go deeper and see what do we want to really come out of this. Do we want to continue to perpetuate the disproportionalities that we've seen over some things that just needs guidance, you know? And I just want to put that on the table. Let's approach it with love in mind. I know that, yeah, I'm telling you, you're right. Climatically, in some spaces, hasn't been everything we wanted to be, but there are a lot of spaces in our district. I'm talking about in Madison Metropolitan School District that's going exceptionally well. That could be a model for other places. But those environments that we have, that we know that were troubling before the pandemic, they just were exacerbated by the pandemic because there are other issues outside of just learning math and science. And I just really want us to look at it deeply together and see how can we do better. I know we can do better. Even this discussion tonight, the things that were raised, let's just go deeper and how we can get to the point where we can kind of mitigate those strategies like we've done this pandemic. And I believe we'll be in a better place because of it. And that's, I just know we can do better. I was excited as a pig in slop when we said we weren't going to have suspensions at the elementary level. And who wants to go back and start suspending the children who've been impacted the most by the pandemic starting in the fall? So yeah, let's work now. Let's work this summer. Let's work before they come back to us to make sure it's a better experience for scholars and for staff and for our parents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. First of all, one question. If we do not codify this moratorium on suspensions, will it expire at some date?
Sherry, you might want to jump in here. I don't recall it having an end date associated. So I would assume it would continue, but Sherry, I'll let you weigh in on that.
It will continue. It doesn't have an end date.
Okay, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that I understand all of our requests for more data, but just to kind of ground ourselves in another space, so to speak, is that I view this as a strategy to deconstruct the school to prison pipeline. So we received a board memo on December 2nd, reported on in the Cap Times, December 24th. But in that memo, we saw that, bear with me here, our total number of out-of-school suspensions dropped from 441 out-of-school suspensions to 356 students. That's down from the last year, 2019, in the first quarter of 2019 to 618 given to 472 students. So we saw a drop there. However, disproportionality for Black students persisted. 18% of our student population is Black, yet 51% received out-of-school suspension. Of the students who received suspensions, 51% received out-of-school suspensions for Black, 48% for in-school suspensions. That was a decrease from fall 2018, 59% of students who received suspensions were Black, 56 in-school suspensions were Black. And it only gets worse as you go further in time. Also in that memo from December 3, we saw that there had been 94 documented uses of alternatives to suspensions for 87 different students. That was on pace and tracking for prior years. And so I'm wondering what limited our use of more alternatives to suspensions. And look, I am eager to see the data from quarters 2, 3, and 4. We have data for quarter 1. But I'll be honest, there is a volume research, education research that demonstrates the bad effects of suspending a child from school. It leads to more suspensions. It does not lead to more academic learning. It leads to a greater chance of being involved in the juvenile justice system and then the adult justice system. And I don't think a quarter of data is going to contradict those decades of research. Some national data. This week, New York Times conducted a survey of 362 school counselors. Of those school counselors surveyed, 86% they saw an increase in trouble focusing on classwork. 94% saw that 94% saw increased signs of anxiety and depression. That's consistent with Dane County data. Every few years, Dane County, the government, does a youth assessment survey. Every year, we see increased signs of anxiety and depression. 73% said that they saw increased instances of students having trouble solving conflicts with friends, and the U.S. Surgeon General called it a national emergency for student and youth mental health. So I am down to have this conversation about the BEP, but I also want us to also connect the dots with some of the resources that we're doing. We talked about the high school health clinics that we're putting in our school. I think that's a piece of this. We've talked about how we've hired more social workers and school therapists. I think that's a huge piece of this. We've talked about partnering with people, with other agencies in the area to address these healthcare gaps that we're seeing. I think that's a piece of this. And so I want us to dive in on the BEP, but I don't think we should treat the BEP as a panacea in terms of this issue and expect this one document. And the last thing I'll say is that we've got to have 360-degree accountability in our schools for students and for teachers. I've talked myself as a student, as a Black student in this district, and when I talk to Black students in the district, it frequently comes up that they say, I see myself being punished for things that my white peers aren't punished for. I think that's something we have to address. Thank you. Board Member Goldschmidt.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the fact that when we're talking about codifying the moratorium on in-school or out-of-school suspensions, we're talking about the elementary BEP, right? And so all the data you're quoting with out-of-school suspensions, we have changed something significantly at this K-5 level. And all I'm saying is I think we have to understand how it's working before we codify it and make more changes, permanent changes to the BEP. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with wanting the data at the K-5 level to really see what this has meant in practice for schools. I think that's a reasonable request.
Definitely, we have it for quarter one, and we will get it for quarters 2, 3, and 4. Dr. Hicks, I see your hand.
Yeah, I would just like, thank you, Board Member Castro. I'm going to come from a lens of a principal who has done a lot of work pre-BEP, during BEP, and also had a school who has predominantly students of color and did not have a high rate of suspensions. And I think when we talk about it, it is related in a lot of ways, in a lot of spaces. And from me even going into school, seeing it is race-based on some levels, lack of understanding, mindset shifts, all of those things have to occur, and an expectation of excellence and rigor and learning on the front end. And I think that as a district, we need to go back to those pieces. And also there is still a great deal of trauma from people and their experiences with the BEP and what they thought the BEP was not doing when it was shifting them from being reactive to being, progressive discipline and being proactive on the front end. A great deal of education for staff, a great deal of education for scholars, and a great deal of education for families have to be ongoing and often, and not a one and done. What are the values? How are our values as a district being lived in action in our buildings? Because from my perspective, if those are non-existent, then we're going to get a lot of anything and everything. And then people will start operating out of fear, which then puts our scholars at a deficit because they're not doing the right thing for the right reasons, but responding in ways out of fear, of lack of, I guess, what's the word I want to use? Lack of being truly looking at the whole child. Because if we're really talking about educating young people as well as adults, because as we know, and in my experience, there are lots of adults who are in our buildings who do not know and understand how to interface, understand, work with, love on young people. And I think they're not clear about parts of their entire role of being responsible for the care of all of our children and what that means and what that looks like. And so as we think about the BEP or any of their parts of it, or if we went back and thought about the code of conduct, it wasn't about the punishment. Sometimes it was. It was also sometimes about what do we want children, young people to learn? How do, like I started out earlier this evening when we're talking about restorative justice. There are young people out here helping to shift the adult mindset around what that is. If that's not happening consistently across the board, so there's a level of coherence that needs to be built from pre-K through 12, right? There has to be some communication around what bottom lines are. Yeah, we get middle school scholars who are becoming, sexual human beings and not really understanding what's going on. How are we educating around those things? Not just once, not in a unit, but ongoing. Because hearing something once, we know what happens with young people. It goes to one ear and out the other, right? We need to keep coming back around and coming back around and coming back around so that we're not putting all the onus of our children of color's education on the few staff of color that is in our buildings. And that's what I'm seeing in a lot of spaces right now. As I continue on my journey in this role, that will be being addressed across the middle school level, across the elementary level, and across the high school level, because that whole level of consistency and coherence has to exist before we can even begin to move. And there is a sense of urgency around that, right? But the sense of urgency can't be so much that it then ends up harming young people, harming staff, and harming families. So we have to really take an intensive look at the entire process before we, we want to make sure that we're in compliance around, Title IX and other things. But where's the education where's that coming from? Because I'm just going to tell you, I've had issues with young third graders, doing some inappropriate things to other third graders. And where's the education around? This goes way a little ways back, but it's about education, right? And it's about it's not just the academic pieces, because these are strategies and things learning that needs to take place that will allow us to get to the academic pieces. Everyone doesn't come with the same level of understanding, same level of resources, even when it comes to mental health. It's all different. Their access what's going on in one school and different from the other, but we have to build the bridge of the entire Madison community and really be focused on what is it that we want young people to know and be able to do? How are we going to help them to learn that? And then what are we going to do when they do not, right? So that level of understanding and level of support needs to be there. Otherwise, that pipeline, again, as well as, we have a level of responsibility that we want young people to have. We have a level of responsibility that we want staff to have. We have a level of responsibility that we want families to have, but we're not doing any education around the responsibilities that we are looking for, then we can't change anything. And I think that that's where we need to start before we start thinking about, trying to, not dismantle, change, or however, but there needs to be a level of coherence pre-K-12 around all of this work.
All right, thank you. So moving on to our next policy change, talking about a plan for middle school students who take high school level courses.
Thank you so much. And I am looking forward to continuing this conversation with the board and hopefully having the conversation on the right topics together on how we really make this change. We're happy also to provide that end of year data if needed. But I just want to make sure as we continue these conversations, we're focused on the right conversation for our students. Jesse, can you please share the slide? There's a single slide left. It is our last item for the evening.
Is it this one, policy 3541?
Yep, it's just not showing up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. The additional policy that will be coming forth to the board at the end of the month is policy 3541, which is about our middle school scholars being able to earn high school credit while in middle school. I alluded to this a little before when we were talking about the Early College STEM Academy. This is a policy where the changes are really exciting for us and are really creating and opening up more opportunities for our students. There's just a few minor changes that I'll highlight. One, that the policy as we are recommending be changed is that credit is granted automatically for any student that takes a high school credit bearing course while in middle school. The current policy requires a family to opt in to that credit opportunity versus making it just a universal opportunity. These opportunities are available for 7th and 8th grade students only based on DPI legislation. The second component is that under these changes, we believe it becomes a much lower risk opportunity for students in that DPI recommends that students earn the high school credit for the course, but that the grade is not factored into a student's high school GPA. So that means a student taking these courses in middle school may earn a B or a C in the course, which gives them great exposure to high school courses, which gives them a safety net of a bank of credits going into high school, but that GPA does not have to follow them into high school and affect their high school GPA in any way. We believe that's a low risk opportunity for more students to take advantage of taking high school credit while in middle school. We also believe that some of these changes are going to really open up universal opportunities across our middle schools for many more students to take high school courses in middle school, which in turn then creates many more opportunities for our high school students to take college coursework in middle school based on this policy change. So I will pause here, Chair Castro, to see if there's any questions or anything coming up as we kind of round out our night.
Hey, questions from board members?
And Jesse, would you mind taking us off screen? Thank you.
All right, board member Gomes-Schmidt.
This isn't really a question. When I'm looking in board docs, I don't see the redlined version. It's just the changed version, I think. So can you just provide us with the redlined one?
Absolutely. I'll work with Sherry to make sure you have that. Thank you.
Okay. And I think this is a really important step to removing the barriers so families don't have to opt in. It's just an automatic thing. So I really appreciate the changes. Thanks.
All right, I'll say real quick, I think this is a great opportunity for our students to take risk in their academic and intellectual journey, get exposure to new concepts, and also get through our system more successfully and faster. So thank you. All right, before we adjourn, I want to say thank you to Jesse, our new board secretary. Thank you so much. This is a long night, but we are so thankful to have you on our team. So thank you. May I please get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, moved, second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Permission to have